Chapter 1108. Shui Mingjun stood in the shade of Skyfire Base's walls, looking to the west. If that man got wind of the situation, would he give up on the 9th level adept and come back to deal with him? He'd think the army here wouldn't be able to withstand the zombies. If the zombies broke through, he'd be forced out. Would that woman really be able to deal with him? From what Shui Mingjun knew, aside from the crazy 9th level adept, only Sikong Chun and Wu Chungyue had the ability to deal with Yan Huiguang. After all, Yan Huiguang was on the verge of breaking through to 8th level. If it was before, Shui Mingjun would have thought Yan Huiguang wouldn't give up a chance to break through to the next level. But now he wasn't so sure. Yan Huiguang hated him. After all, Shui Mingjun had ruined many of his plans and research bases for revenge. Shui Mingjun looked to the outside of the base. It was quiet, but for a few kilometers it was filled with zombies. He could feel the presence of many 6th-level zombies, but he couldn't pinpoint their location. At least a dozen 1st-level kings. Then there must be 1 or 2 2nd-level kings. He muttered to himself. But why were the zombies only guarding the perimeter and not attacking? What does the high-level zombie that controls the zombie wave want to do? Was it waiting for an opportunity? Moreover, how did this tide of zombies come about? Why hadn't they heard of it before? The Shui Ming army was puzzled by the sudden encirclement of Skyfire Base. The base was so large, even if a natural zombie wave were to occur, it would only appear at 1 or 2 gates, or in one direction. But the sudden appearance of so many zombies had surrounded the entire base. There wasn't a single gap. It was watertight. All the humans in the base were suddenly trapped in the base. Meanwhile, the army had already prepared a few helicopters. They took off and flew out of the base. The ground was surrounded by zombies, so their only option was to fly out and get help. Chui Tingguang watched the helicopters take to the skies. I hope they make it out of the base. It's our last resort. There shouldn't be any flying zombies. Commander Lu wiped the sweat from his brow. He looked at the surrounding sky with trepidation, afraid that something suspicious would suddenly fly out. Lin Xiao heard the helicopter as well. She turned her head to look at where it was flying, but didn't bother with it. She continued in Yan Huiguang's direction. Behind her, a few figures quickly flew over, following Yan Huiguang's aura. At this time, Yan Huiguang's car was parked a few hundred meters away from the place where the zombies were gathered. Beside him stood dozens of living dead that exuded the smell of zombies. Their zombie aura was strange. It made the zombies feel like they were of the same kind, but at the same time they weren't. There was a sense of danger in their aura. The ordinary zombies that didn't know how to think unconsciously avoided their position, and didn't approach Yan Huiguang's position. Yan Huiguang's own aura was very strong. The aura of a rank 7 or 8 metahuman was not something ordinary zombies would dare to approach. Yan Huiguang was paying attention to the reactions of the dozens of zombies around him. He wanted to see if there were any high-level zombies hidden in the surrounding zombies. The sudden appearance of such a large-scale zombie tide was definitely not natural. Yan Huiguang didn't just study the inside of their bodies. He also paid attention to how they lived, how they thought, and how they behaved. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to survive so peacefully outside the base. He guessed there had to be some level 7 zombies plotting something. That's why Skyfire's people were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the horde. But how many level 7 zombies were there? He couldn't be sure. It wasn't something a level 7 zombie could do. He thought back to when China and Heilong had been besieged by zombies. It was because of a lightning-type zombie emperor that Heilong hadn't been able to withstand the onslaught of zombies. Fortunately, the emperor's target wasn't all the humans in Heilong, but only a few. It was here that Yan Huiguang realized the horde of zombies outside of Skyfire Base was completely still. There were a lot of them, but what was the meaning of all this? Yan Huiguang frowned when he sensed a group of level 5 and 6 zombies heading his way. He opened the door and got out of the car. "Stay alert," he barked. The zombies he'd brought with him were all on high alert. When Lin Xiao arrived, she didn't reveal herself. Instead, she quietly approached the zombies Yan Huiguang had brought. They didn't look much different from a normal person, but their eyes were dull and lifeless. Their exposed skin was the same as a human's. There were no signs of white or atrophy or any of the other symptoms of the zombie virus. If you didn't look closely at their eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell they were dead. The aura they gave off was different. There was a strange energy around them, mixed with the zombie virus. Mixed with the zombie virus and other things, it should be the energy of the mutated zombie virus. So these were the zombies Yan Huiguang had created? It looked like the chief was intentionally suppressing the progress of the experiment. That was why he'd tricked Li Jingye. Look at this group, aren't they the successful ones? Each one of them looked to be at the beginner level, but Lin Qiao felt a sense of danger from them. She didn't know what was so special about these zombies. At this moment, the zombies on Yan Huiguang's side suddenly lowered their heads, but their eyes turned vertical. One by one, they opened their mouths and let out a low roar. Yan Huiguang's eyes sharpened as he looked at the dozen figures that had suddenly appeared in front of him. These figures were wearing the same camouflage combat uniform and sunglasses. They were no different from the zombie hunter metahumans. But Yan Huiguang had a way to distinguish the aura of these people in front of him. They weren't humans. There were only 5 level 6 zombie kings, and the rest were only level 5 zombie leaders. They stopped 200 meters in front of him, standing in the middle of the road. Some were on the roof of abandoned cars, while others were standing on telephone poles, street lamps, or the roofs of the buildings beside them. They looked at him quietly and didn't seem to be doing anything. Were they still zombies? They were like a trained army, giving off an oppressive aura. Even Yan Huiguang, who was about to break through to level 8, felt a trace of pressure when facing them. Chapter 1109. The experimental zombies on Yan Huiguang's side were all wearing specially made white lab coats. It formed a sharp contrast with the intermediate zombies in army green camouflage uniforms. After observing the experimental zombies, Lin Qiao walked towards Yan Huiguang. But when she was 10 meters away from him, she saw Yan Huiguang's brows suddenly wrinkled. His eyes were filled with doubt as he looked in her direction. Huh? Lin Qiao stopped in surprise and then took a few steps back. She saw the doubt in Yan Huiguang's eyes disappear. He turned his head and looked at the intermediate zombies 200 meters away. Lin Qiao saw him turn his head and walked a few steps towards him. Sure enough, the man turned his head and looked at her with a gloomy face. Come out. What kind of man are you if you hide? Yan Huiguang finally stared at Lin Qiao's position and said, Ha ha ha. That's not a man. She's a woman. At this time, 200 meters away from Yan Huiguang, the zombies who were standing still suddenly made a sound. A woman's voice came from afar. Yan Huiguang suddenly turned his head and looked at them, his eyes flashing. Lin Qiao appeared, looked at Yan Huiguang and said, I'm really not a man. Then she walked to 10 meters away from Yan Huiguang and stood still. The shadows behind her flickered. The intermediate zombies all flashed behind her and stood in a row, hands clenched on the back of their waists, legs slightly open. The strict and disciplined atmosphere of the army came directly. In Yan Huiguang's eyes, he had already raised his guard. But at this time, Lin Qiao rolled her eyes at her subordinates. What are you doing? I've never seen you pass by. Why are you suddenly pretending to be serious? The zombies who were suddenly ridiculed by their own boss looked at her speechlessly. Yan Huiguang on the opposite side. Duanwan walked to Lin Qiao's side and looked at the zombies around Yan Huiguang in confusion. Those people, Lin Qiao said. Oh, they're not human anymore. If he said it was a zombie, it didn't seem like an ordinary zombie. Yan Huiguang, you dare to use psychics as experimental zombies, you really can't be described as a normal person. Yan Huiguang narrowed his eyes and looked at her coldly. Who are you? How do you know my name? Lin Qiao looked at him in amusement. Hey, you still don't know who I am? Didn't you hear about me from the Blue Land? She directly admitted her identity. Yan Huiguang's expression froze, and then a strange light burst forth from his eyes. You're the female leader of the Universal Base? Are you really human? Lin Qiao looked at him indifferently. He did not care about the strange and dangerous look in his eyes and said, What do you think? Do you think I'm not human? Yan Huiguang looked at her seriously, and then glanced at the zombies behind her. He could sense the breath of these intermediate zombies, but he could not sense the breath of this woman. Therefore, it was impossible to determine whether she was a human or a zombie. This piqued Yan Huiguang's interest in researching Lin Xiao. If you surrender, I'll tell you whether I'm human or not. Your best friend once told you that knowing too much is not good for you. Do you still remember this principle? Lin Xiao put one hand in the pocket of her clothes and stretched out the other hand to release a black flame from the palm of her hand. Then she threw the fist-sized black flame in her hand like a toy, dropped it, and caught it. Then she threw it again, dropped it, and caught it again. When Yan Huiguang saw the black flame in her hand, his pupils violently shrank. He looked at Lin Xiao with a very fearful expression, and lowered his head to let the hair on both sides of his forehead cover his face. His gaze from the gap of his hair was cold and vigilant, and all the muscles in his body were tense. It seemed that he would suddenly make a move at any time. What? You don't want to surrender? Or do you think that you can escape from me just by relying on your 7th level dual element arcana? Or those experimentals behind you? Isn't it good to cooperate? I'm not ready to let you die now. Don't you also want to see that person? Lin Xiao still had a leisurely look and played with the flame in her hand. However, he spoke kindly to the man with long hair covering his face. Is he the one who told you about me? After hearing Lin Xiao's words, Yan Huiguang's breath dropped a lot, and his whole body emitted a cold chill. He betrayed me again. Yan Huiguang gritted his teeth and stared at Lin Xiao, and said with a voice as cold as his breath, "He actually sold my information to a woman he doesn't know. I don't care what grudges you have, why don't you confront each other face to face?" Lin Xiao suddenly swung her hand, and the black flame in her hand was suddenly thrown at Yan Huiguang. When the black flame the size of a fist flew into the air, it suddenly expanded into a huge black flame tiger head, and it opened its mouth to bite Yan Huiguang. Yan Huiguang saw Lin Xiao's attack, but he didn't panic and retreat. Instead, he stared at Lin Xiao's eyes and focused his mental power and gave Lin Xiao a mental command. One of his dual abilities was the same as Lan Lu's, and it was a mental ability, so he thought he could control Lin Xiao, who was also a 7th level ability. However, the truth was not what he thought. Lin Xiao only smiled coldly and said, "Your spirit type is useless against me. Why don't you control those experimental zombies of yours? It would be more effective." As she said that, she looked at the experimental zombies around Yan Huiguang, and she was particularly curious about the use of these experimental zombies in Yan Huiguang's hands. This was because she had just tried and found that she couldn't use her mind to control them. So, these zombies created by Yan Huiguang's experiments should only listen to him. Yan Huiguang was slightly surprised by Lin Xiao's calm reaction, and he immediately knew that his ability attack had failed. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, his eyes turned. He suddenly waved his hand. "Number 1, number 2, go explode." As soon as he said that, 2 figures immediately flashed out from the group of experimental zombies, and they went to meet Lin Xiao's black flame tiger head that was about to pounce. At the same time, Yan Huiguang quickly retreated to avoid the black flame tiger head's attack. Bang bang dash! The 2 experimental zombies that went to meet it suddenly exploded with a loud sound. In an instant, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and broken limbs fell everywhere. Most of them were engulfed by the black flame tiger head. The huge impact of the explosion shook a part of Lin Xiao's black flame back. The entire shape of the tiger's head disintegrated, turning into an irregular shape. "So you want to use them as human bombs? And the virus will be everywhere when they explode." Lin Xiao dodged and avoided the fate of being sprinkled with blood and flesh. She looked at Yan Huiguang and said calmly, Chapter 11:10. Yan Huiguang retreated to a position 20 meters away from Lin Xiao. He looked at her and said, "They have more than one use. Looks like you want to capture me alive. Let's see if you have the ability to do so." After saying that, he put his finger in his mouth and whistled. The surrounding experimental zombies immediately rushed towards Lin Xiao and the others. With the two previous examples, although Lin Xiao's group of zombies weren't afraid of being infected by the zombie virus, they didn't want to be stained with blood. They all retreated and pulled away from the experimental zombies. Then they threw all kinds of abilities at the experimental zombies. In a flash, Lin Xiao disappeared. Yan Huiguang's expression sank. He noticed that this woman had an invisibility skill, and after she became invisible, there was no smell or breath. Even the experimental zombies around him couldn't smell her. Thinking about it, Yan Huiguang felt that he couldn't deal with this woman for the time being, so he could only retreat. In the next second, Yan Huiguang turned around and quickly moved to the other side. But at this moment, there was a sudden movement in front of him. Yan Huiguang's keen senses detected it. He kicked out fiercely in midair, and sure enough, he kicked something. In the blink of an eye, the woman's figure appeared in front of him. Lin Xiao used her hand to block Yan Huiguang's kick. The two of them separated in midair. After Yan Huiguang kicked Lin Xiao, the recoil made him do a somersault and fell back. But he didn't stay for long. Once he landed, he immediately flashed to the other side. When Lin Xiao was kicked back, she threw out a fire wall. The black fire wall blocked Yan Huiguang's path. Yan Huiguang's perception was very strong. He could vaguely feel her invisibility. Bang, bang, bang dash. A few more explosions came from the side. You let them explode so easily. Isn't it a waste? Lin Xiao flashed behind Yan Huiguang and waved her claws at him. Lin Xiao said. Yan Huiguang turned around and threw a bunch of level 7 wind blades at Lin Xiao. At the same time, he used his wind ability to push his body into the sky. Lin Xiao drew a circle with his arm towards the incoming wind blade. A circle of black flames immediately appeared, forming a circle of black flames. All the wind blades were sucked into the ring of fire. Lin Xiao lifted his head to look at Yan Huiguang, who was flying high up in the sky. He curled the corner of his mouth and clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. Although this Yan Huiguang was only at the peak of level 7 and had yet to reach level 8, he was still a level 8 expert. However, he was quite slippery, and he couldn't kill him directly. Did he think that she wouldn't be able to do anything if he flew into the sky? Lin Xiao was standing on the roof of a building. She leaped to the edge of the building and leaped high up into the sky. At the same time, she waved her hands and threw out a thick black flame. The flame quickly grew bigger and focused on her feet. At the same time, Lin Xiao's hand continuously released a large amount of black flames. The flames slowly formed a huge black dragon under her feet. She stood on the black dragon's head and raised her hand. The black dragon under his feet immediately soared into the sky. Roar! The black dragon leapt into the air and roared in Yan Huiguang's direction. Its roar was just an impact of energy. It wasn't real. However, the area below Lin Xiao's dark dragon, as well as several kilometers away, could hear this roar of energy. Wah! I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Yan Xiao, who was on the ground, was already trembling in fear when Lin Xiao released the black flaming dragon. Now, she was shaken by the impact of this energy. She immediately surrendered. When she turned around, she saw that most of her companions had already retreated far away. Fuck! Why didn't you guys call me when you ran away? Yan Xiao shouted in dissatisfaction. Fortunately, the leader's attack wasn't directed at her. If it was directed at her, she would have died. If it was directed at her, she probably wouldn't even need the leader to do anything. She would have exploded from the pressure. Sure enough, a level 8 zombie emperor going berserk was too scary. Although it was just an aura, it wasn't something that a level 5 zombie leader like them could withstand. The leader is going to use a big move. If we don't dodge, are we going to stay and get caught up in it? Jing Yan's voice came from afar. Bang, 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 bang dash. Lin Xiao's ability was so strong that the experimental zombies that Yan Huiguang brought started to explode. Woo dash. The ordinary zombies all laid on the ground and didn't dare to move. You really aren't human. Yan Huiguang looked at Lin Xiao and said coldly. What does it matter? You are human, but you don't see other humans as your own kind. I am a zombie, but I won't treat humans as food. Between the two of us, who looks more like an inhumane zombie? Lin Xiao said to Yan Huiguang. The black dragon under her feet had grown to a huge size of 100 meters under the release of her ability. Just like that, it floated in the sky in the darkness. Looks like you aren't going to let me go today. Yan Huiguang suddenly lowered his head and his hair covered his face. What's so good about humans? Selfishness, jealousy, resentment, cowardice, two-faced. The deep-rooted bad habits of humans can never be dispelled. As he spoke, he suddenly took out a small tube of medicine and poured it into his mouth. After drinking the unknown potion, Yan Huiguang raised his head and laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha, humans are the weakest creatures in the world, but at the same time, they are the dirtiest creatures. What's so funny? Ha ha ha, humans shouldn't exist in this world. What's so bad about zombies? Zombies are immortal and can control their own kind that are weaker than them. Now the world is full of zombies. This is the world of zombies. What do we need humans for? Humans should just become zombies. Ha 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 ha. Looking at the crazy Yan Huiguang, Lin Xiao was speechless and looked at him like a dead fish. What about the water army? You don't care if he becomes a zombie? She suddenly asked. Yan Huiguang's wild laughter froze, and his laughter came to an abrupt halt. He looked at Lin Xiao, stunned for 2 seconds, then said, "What does it matter? If he becomes a zombie, he won't betray me and won't cause trouble for me. Moreover, he will listen to me obediently and do whatever I ask him to do. Isn't that good?" Lin Xiao smiled. "You really are a pervert. You say that, but your heart clearly doesn't think that way." Yan Huiguang heard her words and shouted, "What do you know? Everyone in this apocalypse only wants to live. For their own survival, they can betray, sell, deceive, treat you well in front of you, but shoot you in the back. This is human. He betrays me again and again, but still acts like a good person in front of me." Lin Xiao frowned and looked at him. She suddenly moved her hand behind her back. A tiny wisp of black mist suddenly leaped out from behind Yan Huiguang and burrowed into his ear. Chapter 11:11. Yan Huiguang's body suddenly trembled. Then he stared at Lin Xiao and pointed at her. "You actually plotted against?" As he said that, he rolled his eyes, and the wind ability under his body dissipated. His body tilted, and his whole body fell from the sky. "Leader." Yan Huiguang's subordinates who had just driven over were shocked when they saw this scene. "Don't worry, he won't die." Lin Xiao looked at Yan Huiguang falling, and didn't plan to catch him. Instead, the black dragon under her feet suddenly shrank into her body, and she jumped down from the sky. And Yan Huiguang was suddenly jumped by a huge black panther, and was brought down from the sky. "You! Who are you? What did you do to our leader?" A large convoy suddenly appeared behind them, and they pointed at Lin Xiao and shouted nervously. The black panther gently jumped in front of Lin Xiao with Yan Huiguang in its mouth, and put him on the ground. Lin Xiao didn't care about the convoy and people that just appeared, but squatted down to look at Yan Huiguang's face. She reached out her hand to wipe his face, and a black mist came out of his nose and ears, and then went into Lin Xiao's palm. Seeing that Yan Huiguang's face had turned green, a strange virus energy spread from his stomach and spread throughout his body. Lin Xiao quickly took out a cup of energy lake water, and then she opened his mouth and poured the lake water in. 1 cup wasn't enough, and she continued to pour 2 more cups before stopping. "What do you want to do to our leader?" A large group of people came down from the convoy, and each of them was filled with weapons and ammunition. All of them fiercely rushed towards Lin Xiao. Suddenly, a row of people appeared in front of them and neatly blocked their way. "Don't come any closer, or else you'll have to bear the consequences." Duan Wan shouted at the other party with a cold face. "Yo, women, TSK, TSK, TSK. And there's more than one. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are actually 7 or 8 women in your team. Today is really an eye-opener. I can see so many beauties. The one 9-meter-tall man who was with Yen Huiguang looked at the row of zombies in front of him. He didn't know that it was a group of zombies because his eyes were attracted by Duan Wan, Yen Xiao, and the other women. As bandits of the apocalypse, women were rare and precious to them. It wasn't just the big guy who had such thoughts. The group of men behind him also had their eyes fixed on the women. His eyes lit up, and he looked as if he was about to drool. Some of them even revealed wretched smiles. At this moment, they had temporarily forgotten that their boss was in someone else's hands. Put away your disgusting gazes. Otherwise, I don't mind helping you dig out your eyes. Ink, who had a cold personality, spoke to them in a very displeased manner. These men's gazes were too disgusting. It wasn't just Mo who felt uncomfortable. It was the same for the others. Leader, can we beat up these robbers? Yen Xiao asked loudly with his back facing Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao said without raising his head, "Whatever." As soon as she said that, Yen Xiao immediately shouted, "Go!" After saying that, a few graceful figures immediately shot out. Before Yen Huiguang's subordinates could react, they saw a figure flash in front of them in an instant, and a fist was aimed at their eyes. Ow! Ah! Ow! Ow! Soon, there was a series of painful screams. Yi Qingxian carefully moved to Summer's side and whispered, "Did you see that? They specialize in hitting faces. Women really can't be provoked." Summer shrugged. "Why don't you just kill them? What's the point of just hitting them?" Yi Qingxian glanced at him and said, "Leader didn't say to kill them." Summer looked at him and said, "These are all bandits of the apocalypse, a group of inhumane humans. Even if Leader didn't say to kill them, Leader won't blame us." Fuck! Don't mix us with those bandits of the apocalypse, okay? We've never done anything to humans. At this time, one of the people who was being beaten accidentally heard Summer's words and suddenly retorted loudly with his head in his hands. "Aren't all bandits of the apocalypse the same? What's there to mix with?" Yi Qingxian heard and asked loudly with doubt. "Ow! Stop! 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 Grandaunt, don't hit the face, okay? It hurts." The 9-meter-tall man whose ability was only at level 5 was trampled on the ground by Mo, who was a level 6 zombie, so he could only beg for mercy. "We're different from those bandits. We've never taken the initiative to harm anyone," he cried out while dodging Mo's fists. "How is that possible? Those bomb zombies that your leader brought along earlier, weren't they all living mutants who were captured by you and made into zombies?" Mo stood beside the tall man with one foot on his back and said coldly. Lin Xiao turned her head to look at them and asked, "What's going on?" saying that she stood up and got someone to tie Yen Huiguang up. At this moment, the strange virus in Yen Huiguang's body was in a stalemate with the lake water energy that she had poured into his body. She was afraid that the outcome wouldn't be decided so quickly so he wouldn't wake up. When Moe heard Lin Xiao's question, he immediately retracted his leg. He bent down and grabbed the clothes on the tall man's back and pulled him in front of Lin Xiao. "You said those mutants weren't captured by you. Don't tell me they sent themselves to us?" Duan Wan kicked away a level 4 mutant and leaped over to ask. Speaking of which, it was strange following Yen Huiguang's group. Other than Yen Huiguang, who was the highest level mutant, there weren't many mutants in this group of 200 to 300 people. 70% of them were ordinary people. Moreover, the mutants' levels weren't high, the highest was only level 5. Like that tall man. "Yes, that's right. They sent themselves to us. We didn't provoke them, it was them who thought we were the bandits and wanted to kill us. That's why our leader captured them and made them into zombies. Many of our people were killed by them." The tall man was thrown in front of Lin Xiao by Moe, and he knew that this group of people was more than a level higher than them. He simply gave up resisting and sat on the ground holding his swollen face. Even their strongest leader had been subdued, what else could they say? Lin Xiao looked at the ordinary people who were hiding behind the cars holding their weapons and staring at them. She lowered her head and asked the tall man. But he passed on the zombie experiment method to Li Jingye and caused the deaths of so many people in Skyfire Base. "What's the difference between you and him?" The tall man said, "We need food. It's hard enough to survive outside the safety of the base. Add to that the lack of food, we'll all starve to death. Besides, we don't just have a few dozen people, we have hundreds of people. Lin Xiao looked at him and was silent for a few seconds. No matter what your motives are, following people like Yan Huiguang, you've all been labeled as bandits during the apocalypse. Even if you're relying on Yan Huiguang to survive, it's the same. Lin Xiao found out from the tall man's thoughts that they were relying on Yan Huiguang to survive. Although Yan Huiguang didn't care about the lives of others, he needed people to do his research. Both parties were just using each other. Chapter 11-12. Lin Xiao picked up Yan Huiguang and turned to leave. Let's go. The zombies immediately turned around and left, leaving Yan Huiguang's subordinates looking at each other. They took the leader? What do we do now? Do we go save him? One of the men sidled up to the big guy. The big guy stood up and dusted himself off. He watched Lin Xiao's men leave and was silent for a moment. How do we save him? We don't even know who they are. They won't kill us based on our strength. Then, if we don't save him, we won't have anyone to trade for food from the bases. Won't we starve to death? One of the men panicked. What's the rush? Without him, we can still work with the bases. Our subordinates have also mastered a lot of experimental methods, and the medicine we make can also be traded with those people in the base. Even if we don't have the drugs, we still have weapons. If we can't, we can help them kill the zombies and protect their lives. We'll get paid. The big guy said. Okay. Lin Xiao led Yan Huiguang away. She turned to the zombies. All right, let's get rid of the zombies. We don't need them anymore. The zombie wave was a ruse to lure Yan Huiguang. She wasn't going to let them hit Skyfire base. Yes, sir. The zombies all left in a flash. Lin Kuei followed suit. After all, they had to evacuate tens of thousands of zombies from the outer perimeter of Skyfire base. They couldn't just call them off from one position. Once they were gone, Lin Xiao found a tall building and howled at the zombies on both sides. Roar! After her voice spread far away, the zombies in the surrounding dozens of miles began to slowly disperse. Lin Xiao tossed Yan Huiguang into the space, then stealthily made her way back to Skyfire base. He quickly found the location of Shui Mingjun's aura and quietly appeared behind him. Shui Mingjun stood on the roof of a building not far from the city walls. His eyes were calm as he stared off into the distance. Plop! At this moment, a figure suddenly fell in front of him. Shui Mingjun was shocked. Who's there? The person who had fallen in front of him was lying quietly on the ground. It was motionless, as if it were dead. After taking a closer look, Shui Mingjun was shocked and his eyes widened. Long hair. If you want to kill him, you can do it now. A woman's voice came from behind him. Shui Mingjun quickly turned his head to look. It was the woman who had appeared in his basement yesterday. You really caught him? Then why is he like this now? Shui Mingjun looked at her in disbelief. He was shocked. In his heart, Yan Huiguang had always been a very dangerous person. Not only was he powerful, but he was also very vigilant. If it wasn't for the fact that he understood him very well and that his strength was much stronger than his, he wouldn't have been able to kill him. Just by relying on his level 7 wind attribute special ability, not many people could stop him if he wanted to escape. But now, Yan Huiguang was thrown in front of him without moving. Shui Mingjun turned his head to look at Yan Huiguang again and found that his eyes were closed. The corners of his mouth were purple, and his face was abnormally pale. The aura on his body was so weak that it was unbelievable. He drank the zombie potion he developed himself. I think his brain has gone haywire. I used another medicine to suppress the virus in his body, so he's like this. Why don't you want to kill him? Are you still concerned about his situation? Lin Xiao said indifferently. As he said that, he looked at Shui Mingjun strangely. Shui Mingjun said, Yes, I want to kill him, but I want to ask him why he shot me in the back a few years ago. What did I do wrong to him? Lin Xiao thought about it and said, He seemed to say that you betrayed him, because this long hair said that Shui Mingjun betrayed him. But Lin Xiao sensed his thoughts at that time, and it seemed to be a long time ago. Shui Mingjun was stunned and said, "I betrayed him? When did I betray him?" Lin Xiao crossed his arms and looked at him. "I'm very curious. You guys have been killing each other these years. Why haven't you figured out the reason?" Shui Mingjun's eyes darkened. "Even if it was a misunderstanding, the bullet was already on me. The damage was done. I gave him a chance. I wanted to hear his explanation before I decided whether or not to forgive him. But he didn't give me an explanation. Every time he killed me, he didn't say anything." Lin Xiao looked at Yan Huiguang lying on the ground. "So what are you going to do now? Kill him? Even if you don't kill him, he won't wake up. He won't die, but he's been infected with the zombie virus." Shui Mingjun stared at Yan Huiguang, his eyes wavering. One moment they were cold and murderous, the next they were pained and hesitant. Although he was resolute in the face of others, when it came to Yan Huiguang himself, he began to waver. After a moment's thought, he looked at Lin Xiao. "If I say I won't kill him, what are you going to do? If I'm not mistaken, you're the female leader of Universal Base. As for why you're here, it's mainly to find him. Taking care of Li Jingye and his people is just a side mission." Although Shui Mingjun didn't understand why this woman would attack the leaders of Hidden Cloud City, Earth Dragon, and Skyfire bases after establishing her own safety base, Shui Mingjun didn't understand. Was she trying to avenge Lin Xiao, the female leader of Hades base? Or was she trying to avenge the victims of Hades base? Or could it be that some of her relatives had died in the war? But her purpose in coming to Skyfire base wasn't just to take care of Li Jingye. Hearing his question, Lin Xiao thought for a moment and said, "I've said it before, he knows too much. I wanted to kill him, after all, only a dead man can keep his mouth shut. But I changed my mind because I don't have many doctors in the base. If he's willing to work for me, I can spare his life. But he's in this state, I don't know if he'll wake up. What do you think I should do?" What she meant was that Yan Huiguang could either follow her and work for her, or die with her secret identity. That way she'd have nothing to worry about. As for whether or not Yan Huiguang would wake up, that was just to fool Shui Mingjun. She'd let her bite him, fight poison with poison, and Yan Huiguang would wake up. But he had to think of a way to deal with that crazy personality of his. So Lin Xiao decided to use Shui Mingjun to teach Yan Huiguang a lesson. Chapter 11:13. What conditions do you have? Give him to me? Shui Mingjun looked at Lin Xiao and asked. Lin Xiao shook her head. "I can't give him to you under any conditions, unless you can kill him in front of me. If you can't, then he can only be controlled by me." Shui Mingjun looked at her and was silent for a while, then said, "I know you are the beautiful leader of the base. According to the current talent in the base, it is very lacking. I think if you kill Yan Huiguang, you might as well let him work for you. Although his ideas are a bit different, his medical skills and research mind are very rare talents. Wouldn't it be a pity to kill him?" Lin Xiao looked at Shui Mingjun with a strange light in her eyes and said to him, "You have a good plan. What if I keep him and can't control him? Although his medical skills are very good, there is something wrong with his brain. Let's not talk about anything else. How can you be sure he will wake up?" Looking at Shui Mingjun's words, he had already prepared a way out for her and Shui Mingjun. He obviously thought that he could wake Yan Huiguang up again. This man could see things clearly. Shui Mingjun looked at her quietly. "Don't pretend. If you can't save him, you don't have to bring him to me. So what conditions do you have?" Lin Xiao looked at him, crossed her arms in front of her chest, raised her hand to touch the tip of her chin, and said, "Well, you saw through me. Since that's the case, you and he should first clearly explain the enmity between you two. Then how about you go to my base with him?" Shui Mingjun was also a level 6 psychic, and he was also an intelligence expert. With his addition, she would be able to get more detailed information from her sources. After all, Xiadong had a lot of information, so it was not convenient for him to sneak into other people's base to inquire. Shui Mingjun looked at Lin Xiao with surprise. "You want me to go with him? Together? And why do you want to know about our matter so much?" What is your purpose? Lin Xiao shrugged. No purpose. I'm just curious. I'm also curious. At this time, a head suddenly popped out from the side of the building, and Duan jumped up. Me too. Just as Duan's voice fell, another woman flashed out from the other side. Well, a female zombie. Yen Xiao reported to Lin Xiao. Report, the mission in the northeast has been completed. Her mission, of course, was to see how the zombies were retreating. She only returned when they were a few kilometers away from Skyfire Base. Lin Xiao nodded, then narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance, saying, almost all of them have retreated. Now it's up to Skyfire's own people. Women's curiosity is really scary, although I also want to know why that bastard Yen Huiguang said that I betrayed him, trying to assassinate me in the back. But did you kill Li Jingye and Xiao Guofeng? What grudge do they have against you? Shui Mingjun looked at Lin Xiao's subordinates, and they were all women. Feeling a little speechless at their curiosity, he immediately changed the topic. Of course there is. You are in charge of intelligence. Why don't you link Skyfire's current situation to Hidden Cloud City and the Earth Dragon Base? Lin Xiao smiled faintly. Is this the long hair? It's really hairy, like a savage. Yen Xiao and Duan walked behind Lin Xiao and noticed Yen Huiguang, who was lying motionless on the ground. They looked him over. Shui Mingjun looked Lin Xiao up and down, then at Duan. From what he knew, Lin Xiao used to be a powerless woman in Sea City. She was a scumbag with a bad heart. But when she came back from the dead, it was like she was a changed person. She set up her own base and brought a group of powerful subordinates with her. But what she did to Hidden Cloud City, the Earth Dragon Base, and now Skyfire Base was like revenge for the destruction of Hades Base. But she didn't have anything to do with the people of Hades Base. Why would she do that? Shui Mingjun couldn't figure it out. Maybe her change had something to do with someone after the destruction of Hades Base. Maybe she had a fortuitous encounter, and it had something to do with Hades Base. That was why she was targeting Hidden Cloud City, Earth Dragon, and Skyfire. Lin Xiao looked at him. I don't care how I became like this. It has nothing to do with the people of Hades Base. The past is the past, the present is the present. There's no point in thinking so much. Why don't you think about whether or not you want to solve this problem with long hair? Like you said, it's a pity he died. If you can make his head right, why do you think he'll listen to me? Shui Mingjun didn't understand. Why did this woman act like he was a talisman to suppress Yen Huiguang? Because he cares about you. Lin Xiao rolled his eyes and said in his heart. But she didn't say it out loud. You'll understand in the future. Anyway, when he wakes up, you solve your problem first. Then you can solve mine and yours. Shui Mingjun was speechless. You're not going to kill him? Duan looked at Longhair, then at Shui Mingjun. Lin Xiao shook her head. Take him back to share some of Lin Hao's work. Duan said, Isn't he sick in the head? Can he control it? Lin Xiao nodded at Shui Mingjun with his sharp chin. Here, it'll be fine if we bring him along. Duan and Yen Xiao immediately showed a look of understanding. Oh, I understand. Shui Mingjun looked at the three of them blankly. Understand what? Why don't I understand? Lin Xiao glanced at him and said, Didn't I say you'll understand in the future? All right, I'll have to trouble you to pack up your belongings. There's nothing for us to do here. Let's go back. Shui Mingjun was speechless. Wait, I haven't agreed yet. Lin Xiao and the other two looked at him. You don't agree? As they spoke, the three of them silently approached him step by step. Shui Mingjun, who was suddenly threatened, was speechless. Damn, were these three women going to use force? Lin Xiao stopped. She suddenly turned around and waved her hand. It's okay. Yen Huiguang is in my hands. If you don't want to come, fine. Then don't think about why he said you betrayed him and why he shot you in the back. With that, she picked up Yen Huiguang and threw him into the space. Then, she left with Duan and Yen Xiao. Only Shui Mingjun was left, gritting his teeth as he watched the three leave. By now, the people in Skyfire Base had noticed the zombies had retreated. They were both surprised and delighted. Then, after the initial surprise, they began to stir up more trouble with the zombie experiments. Lin Xiao didn't care about the chaos behind them. She led the zombies away from Skyfire Base. They were headed for Qingshan Base. Chapter 11:14. After being scared by the tide of zombies all night, they watched the tide of zombies receding with a confused face. The survivors of Skyfire Base felt that they had aged a few years. After being dumbfounded for a while, he immediately remembered the grudges and hatred between humans in the past. Thus, the army and the Corpse Hunter Corps formed by the Corpse Hunter Corps immediately fought again. Dongfang Yang secretly instigated the Corpse Hunters, saying that the underground experimental base had always been controlled by the army. Their anger and hatred for the death of so many people made the Corpse Hunters want to kill all the army. The army kept complaining about the injustice. They had more weapons and firepower than the Corpse Hunters, so they were not afraid of the attack of the Corpse Hunters. Cui Tingguang and several other corps commanders wanted to appease them, but there was nothing they could do. The soldiers and the Corpse Hunters also started fighting, so the situation became more and more chaotic. Shui Mingjun also knew about the experimental base, but he had some relationship with Dongfang Yang. So he didn't disclose the information, but just watched the development of the situation. Then he thought about whether to forgive Yan Huiguang or not. If he agreed to go to the base, wouldn't it mean that he forgave the bastard? And he also had to figure out why he said he betrayed him and why he plotted against him. However, if the man was really killed by that woman, he couldn't just stand by and watch him die. Although he always said he would kill Yan Huiguang himself, when it came to the real thing, he found that he still couldn't do it. Thinking that if the female leader saved him, they would have to live in the same base in the future, he felt uncomfortable. Just when Shui Mingjun was hesitating, Lin Xiao entered the space and looked at Yan Huiguang, who was thrown on the sofa in the living room of the small building. Then she rolled up the sleeve on his arm and bit him. After 3 seconds, she frowned and loosened her mouth. Then she stood up and turned to the side. Ba, ba, ba. Duan Wan, who was next to her, was already waiting for her with a glass of water. Duan Wan had already prepared it and handed it over. Gulyalu, Lin Xiao rinsed her mouth, went outside and spat out the water in her mouth. Then she said, I don't know how long this bastard hasn't taken a bath. His skin is so salty. Duan Wan couldn't help but cover her mouth. Eft. Lin Xiao gargled a few more times before handing the cup back to her. Then, he walked into the house and observed Yan Huiguang's condition. Although her virus could restrain ordinary zombie viruses, the one Yan Huiguang drank was a mutated virus that he developed himself. Therefore, she was not completely sure that her virus would be effective against Yan Huiguang's current situation. If he died and turned into a zombie, she didn't care. Anyway, he drank it himself. Squinting her eyes, she watched as the two energies in Yan Huiguang's body began to devour the mutated virus he drank after the balance was broken by her virus energy. Lin Xiao's eyes flickered. It seemed like her virus was useful. He's awake. How are you going to convince him? Duan Wan stood beside her and asked curiously. Don't look down on him. He has a weakness in his heart. Lin Xiao walked to the sofa and sat down. Duan Wan sat on the other side of her. Duan Wan was even more curious after hearing Lin Xiao's words. She asked, Does a person like him have a weakness? I thought he had discarded everything that could be a weakness. Lin Xiao smiled faintly and said, The Shui Ming army is his weakness. Oh? Duan Wan asked. It seems like you've learned a lot from him. Lin Xiao looked at Yan Huiguang on the carpet and shook her head. Not much. He deliberately hid some things. He didn't remember it himself, so I can't know. Lin Xiao suddenly looked at Duan Wan and asked, Did you notice that the atmosphere between Lin Kuei and Shou Lily is a little different? Hearing her suddenly changing the topic and asking about Lin Kuei and Shou Lily, Duan Wan looked at her blankly. What's different? If you want to say it's different, I've seen them together a lot recently. The corners of Lin Xiao's mouth curled up, and he narrowed his eyes with a mischievous smile. That girl seems to like this big cat a lot, even though I didn't specifically try to sense their thoughts. Although I didn't deliberately sense their thoughts, I could guess some of it just by looking at their eyes. Didn't you notice? Duan shrugged. What can I notice? I haven't seen them that many times. Looks like that girl will be taken in by someone in the future. Lin Xiao smiled and sighed. Duan looked at her strangely. Why do you look like your daughter is getting married? Lin Xiao glanced at her speechlessly. What daughter? It's a sister. What kind of lousy metaphor is that? At this time, in the Universal Base, Qiu Lili, Lu Jun, Chang Wangxue and the others were waiting outside a remote room in the medical center. Apart from the three of them, there was also Long Qingying, Kong Qingming, and the others. After waiting for a while, the door of the room was opened. Lin Hao walked out with a solemn expression. How is it? Is Wenwen's condition serious? Seeing that he didn't look right, everyone's hearts were in their throats again. Lin Hao shook his head. It's hard to say what will happen to her in this situation. I thought that after her space ability energy was exhausted, her second ability would be able to smoothly advance. I didn't expect it to become like this. The others looked at each other. Chang Wangxue was Lin Wenwen's sister-in-law and was very worried that something would happen to her. Even you can't do anything? Are you going to let her stay unconscious like this? Long Qingying looked at Lin Hao anxiously. Lin Hao said to her, you have to rely on yourself when it comes to ability advancement. What can I do? If her second ability doesn't smoothly advance, she won't wake up. How did it become like this? How did she awaken such a dangerous ability? Sigh. Chang Wangxue sighed helplessly. Her ability is indeed very special. She can only rely on herself now. Lu Jun advised Chang Wangxue from the side. Lin Hao frowned and looked inside the door, then turned around and walked towards his office. You guys go back first. I'll stay here to take care of her. Chang Wangxue said to the others. Let me do it. Sister Shui, you still have to go back to take care of Xiao Lu. It's more convenient for me to be alone. Long Qingying stood by the door and said to Chang Wangxue. Qiu Lili looked left and right, then pouted and said, Sigh. If Qiao Qiao comes back and sees Sister Wenwen in this situation, she'll probably be anxious again. I wonder if the leader can do anything when she comes back. Maybe she'll know what's going on. Lu Jun said to her. Chapter 11:15. After Lin Feng, Yuan Tianqing, and Chan Yuding walked out of the conference room, he asked Chen Xiaoai, who was waiting outside the conference room, Is there any news from Wenwen? Chen Xiaoai shook her head. No. Yuan Tianqing and Chan Yuding heard this and asked him, What's wrong? Did something happen to Wenwen? Lin Feng walked in the direction of his office and said, She suddenly fell into a coma last night. I heard from Lin Hao that her second ability is advancing. But I've never heard of anyone falling into a coma when their ability was advancing. People usually have that kind of reaction when their ability is awakened. Advancing? Coma? Yuan Tianqing was slightly stunned. He suddenly grabbed him and looked at him worriedly. Aren't you going to check on her? Why is this happening? Lin Feng looked at him with some surprise. Then he looked at him and said with a smile, Why are you suddenly so concerned about her? Is it because you gave up on Lin Qiao that you noticed other girls now? Yuan Tianqing glared at him and said, What nonsense are you talking about? Wenwen is half a sister to me after all. Shouldn't I be concerned about her? Lin Feng nodded. Yes, it's my duty. Brother Yuan, can you please let go of me? I have to go in and deal with some matters. Yuan Tianqing was speechless at his strange words. He immediately let go of him and said, Go, go, go. Lin Feng took a few steps towards the office and then stopped as if he thought of something. Then he turned back and said to Yuan Tianqing, Oh, right. I'll go check on Wenwen after work. Since you're so concerned about her, why don't you come with me? Yuan Tianqing looked at him and asked doubtfully, What's going on with her? He really hadn't heard of any paranormal who would have this kind of situation when advancing. Lin Feng said, I don't know either. It seems that Lin Hao hasn't figured out what's going on either. As he said that, he went into his office, leaving Yuan Tianxing outside. He thought about it and also went to his office. On the other side, Qiu Lily ran to the roof of the dormitory building at the second base and sat down, sighing at the sky. On one hand, he was thinking about Lin Xiao's mission, and on the other hand, he was thinking about what Lin Kuei would be sent to do with Lin Xiao. Big Cat had only been away with the leader for 2 days, and she was already thinking about him uneasily. He knew that with the strength of the Big Cat, it shouldn't encounter any difficulties. He just didn't know when it and the leader would return. He hadn't had soft cat fur to stroke for the past 2 days, so his hands felt itchy. Should she go and catch 2 mutated cats to play with? After thinking for a while, she immediately gave up. Who knew how dirty those mutated cats were? They spent all day in the wild, and there might even be parasites on their bodies. Just thinking about it gave her goosebumps. After Yan Huiguang woke up, his eyes were blank for more than 10 seconds before he came back to his senses. He got up from the sofa and looked around. Then, he looked at his fingernails and touched his face. Strange, didn't he drink the mutation potion? Why didn't there seem to be any changes? And this is? Yan Huiguang's gloomy gaze passed through his messy hair and carefully looked around. This is a living room. Why is he lying in a living room? He turned around and walked towards the door in confusion. Suddenly, he felt the breath of more than 10 zombies coming from outside. The breath of these zombies wasn't very strong, around level 4 or 5. Moreover, there were many strange breaths, like the breath of mutated beasts. Walking out of the door, in front of him was a piece of farmland and vegetable field. All kinds of agricultural plants were growing vigorously. In the distance, there was a very large lake, and across the lake there was a boundless grassland. There seemed to be animals on the grassland, or rather, mutated beasts. What is this place? How did he come here? Turning his head to look at the sky, there was a layer of white fog, as if a layer of light was blocked by a white cloth. Looking at the side, there was a forest, and the trees looked very strange. Mutated trees? And there were more than 10 strange beasts in the forest. You're awake? If you're awake, let's talk. A woman's voice suddenly came from behind him. Yan Huiguang suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Xiao with a gloomy gaze. When did this woman get behind him? He didn't feel anything at all. Your gaze really makes people uncomfortable. Lin Xiao looked at him, her eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Then she turned and walked towards the small building. Please come in. Let's sit down and talk. Yan Huiguang still stared at her back, motionlessly watching her walk into the living room of the small building he just came out from. Don't you want to know what happened to you? Seeing that he didn't move, Lin Xiao's voice came from the house again. Yan Huiguang looked down at his hand, his eyes flashing a sharp light. Then he raised his head and walked in. Lin Xiao looked at him walking in with a low pressure and found that his height wasn't low, at least 8 meters. In his mind, he suddenly thought of the scene of him standing together with Shui Mingjun. Well, this height difference is a bit cute. After Yan Huiguang walked in, he sat on the single sofa, expressionlessly looking at Lin Xiao. What do you want? This woman could actually bring him to this place, and he clearly remembered that he had drunk the potion that would turn him into a zombie. But now he didn't turn into a zombie. It must be this woman's doing. Everything he didn't know limited his thoughts. Right now, he could only passively look at the other's every move to make a judgment. Lin Xiao calmly smiled. Aren't you going to ask what I did to you? I think there shouldn't be any problems with your memory. Yan Huiguang coldly stared at her and said, So what if I ask? Is there any meaning to it? Lin Xiao looked at him with surprise and smiled. Then since you don't care, why did you come in and sit here? Yan Huiguang coldly snorted. I'm not stupid enough to not realize that this is an independent space. If I don't make it clear, will you let me out? Lin Xiao nodded. Not bad. You are quite self-aware. You just asked me what I want, so I'll just say it. Why did you think Shui Mingjun betrayed you? In fact, you already realized that you blamed him wrongly, so when he retaliated against you, you tolerated him and didn't kill him. You still care about the relationship between you two, don't you? Then why didn't you just make it clear to him? The more Lin Xiao spoke, the more puzzled she became, and looked at him strangely. This man has a spiritual ability, so he can very well restrict his thoughts to not be discovered by others. Even if Lin Xiao was now at level 8, she could only sense some of his ordinary thoughts. Things that were blocked by him, she still couldn't sense them. Chapter 11:16. Regarding Lin Xiao's meddling, Yan Huiguang just looked at her coldly. He didn't answer her, but some thoughts flashed through his mind. Lin Xiao smiled and looked at him, carefully sensing the fluctuations of his thoughts. Then, after a while, she roughly understood what was going on. It's fine even if you don't want to say it. But you know my secret, and this secret can't be revealed. So you do as you see fit. Lin Xiao smiled faintly at him, not minding his cold and silent attitude. Anyway, even if you don't want to say it, I already know. Lin Xiao silently said in his heart. He felt that Yan Huiguang was still a very simple person. In the past, he would easily listen to other people's words, but he had things in his heart that he wouldn't say. Then, a few years ago, which was 2 years after the apocalypse, he accidentally heard someone say that Shui Mingjun had taken a fancy to a woman that he was with at that time. He knew that the woman was with him, but he still hooked up with that woman. At that time, Yan Huiguang was jealous, but he was still rational. He secretly observed the contact between Shui Mingjun and that woman. Later, he found out that the two were very close, and their behavior was very intimate. Therefore, Yan Huiguang gradually felt that Shui Mingjun had betrayed him. Then, as time passed, Yan Huiguang started to dislike and hate Shui Mingjun more and more. Moreover, he once wanted to ask about the relationship between Shui Mingjun and that woman, but in the end, before he had the time to ask, another thing happened. It was actually because of a woman, and then it became like this. Yan Huiguang liked to let his imagination run wild, but he wouldn't say anything, and his face would also show that he didn't have any thoughts. Therefore, when he later determined that Shui Mingjun had betrayed him for a woman, he already had disloyalty towards Shui Mingjun. It was only after that incident that he completely fell out with the Shui Ming army. At that time, Yan Huiguang was so angry that he lost his rationality and fired a shot at Shui Mingjun. After firing the shot, he was also stunned. He wanted to see if the other party was killed by him, but then he thought of the other party's betrayal and other negative emotions. At that time, he directly turned around and left. It was actually because of a woman. Lin Xiao curled his lips and immediately lost interest in his heart. Lin Xiao's intuition told him that the woman must have done it on purpose. Since she was already in a relationship with Yan Huiguang, why did she still want to get close to the Shui Ming army? Previously, Shui Mingjun couldn't figure out how he had wronged Yan Huiguang, but he just didn't think about women. It was obvious that he didn't know anything. Yan Huiguang's gaze, hidden under his hair, was like a snake hiding in the grass. He looked at Lin Xiao and said, "Either kill me or don't talk nonsense." Lin Xiao clicked his tongue unhappily. "Fine, do you want to die? Let me ask you." The corner of Yan Huiguang's mouth curled up as he sneered, "I'm afraid of death? I already have the zombie virus in my body. Even if I die, I will become a zombie. What's wrong with becoming a zombie? Don't you see that you've obtained more power than others?" Lin Xiao rolled his eyes and suddenly said to him darkly, "Then do you want the lives of the Ming Shui army? What if I say you're dead and he dies too? What does it have to do with him?" Hearing Lin Xiao mention the Ming Shui army and use his life to threaten him, the aura around Yan Huiguang's body was about to turn into snow, and his voice was about to condense into ice shards. Lin Xiao sneered at him and said, "Of course it has something to do with him. Who asked him to be such a good friend of yours? And he has a lot of information about my new base in his hands. Keeping him alive won't do me any good. So, if you want me to not make a move on him, then you have to listen to me. You women are all so despicable and shameless." Yan Huiguang was silent for a few seconds after hearing her words, his eyes flashing with killing intent. It was as if he was about to suddenly make a move on Lin Xiao at any time. After a while, he looked at her and said while gnashing his teeth, "TSK, don't be sexist. okay? Don't tell me that you men have never threatened others before. You only look at the results when dealing with things. Who cares about the methods and process? Originally, if I directly killed you and the Ming Shui army, the result would be the same. But who told me to lack talents now? Lin Qiao shrugged and didn't care much about what he said. After saying that, she looked at Yan Huiguang with great interest and said, "Why didn't you ask the Ming Shui army why he secretly took away that batch of weapons and directly attacked him? With your personality, it's no wonder you only have the Ming Shui army as a friend. You don't know how to explain everything." Lin Qiao asked a question and couldn't help but start to ridicule him. Yan Huiguang looked at her coldly. "You want me to do things for you? How did you know about that matter?" Lin Qiao nodded. "That's right, I want you to join my base. There aren't enough doctors in my base. Aren't you a doctor with good medical skills? As for the matter you mentioned, of course I have my own channels to know what happened. Why should I listen to you? Do you think I would care about the life and death of the Ming Shui army? He has always wanted to deal with me. If he dies, I will have one less trouble." At this time, Yan Huiguang said to her coldly. Lin Qiao looked at him with disdain. "TSK, you don't mean what you say. Now that you know the truth, why won't you face him and explain it to him?" Yan Huiguang didn't want to discuss the matter with her. "It's none of your business." With that, he stood up and walked towards the door, leaving behind a sentence, "Do whatever you want." Lin Qiao's eyes darted around, and a strange smile appeared on her face. "Then why don't you two talk it out face to face?" As she spoke, she stood up and disappeared from the small building. Yan Huiguang, who had just reached the door, stopped in his tracks. He looked back at where she had disappeared, but didn't make a sound. Lin Qiao disappeared from the space and reappeared on the rooftop of a building. They were on the northwest side of Skyfire Base, heading in the direction of Green Mountain. They were less than 100 kilometers from Skyfire Base. As soon as she appeared, the zombies that had been sitting leisurely on the rooftop rose to their feet. "Leader, all the level 4 and above mutant plants, mutant beasts, and zombies have all been killed by us. Here are the spoils of war." The group of zombies surrounded Lin Qiao and handed over piles of zombie cores, energy cores of mutant plants, beast cores of mutant animals, and so on to Lin Qiao. Lin Qiao nodded and took out a bag for them to put the crystal cores inside. Then he glanced around. She looked around, her head aching. "Where's Ajio? What? Didn't you guys keep an eye on him?" The zombies looked at each other. He was here a moment ago? Where did he go?" "Yeah, I saw him wandering there just 2 or 3 seconds ago." "Well, 6. Why didn't you keep an eye on him? Isn't he your zombie?" Old 6 was suddenly called out, and immediately stared at them discontentedly and said, "What, my zombie? The leader told us to keep an eye on him together, not just me. I didn't know you were going to do your own thing." Lin Qiao was speechless. Chapter 11:17. Not far from Skyfire, Shui Mingjuan's aura drifted in. Lin Qiao had been waiting for him. "It looks like you've made up your mind to settle the score with Yan Huiguang?" Lin Qiao looked at Shui Mingjun. Shui Mingjun looked around. Aside from the woman in front of him, there were a dozen others. There were more than 10 people, but their auras did not seem to be human. "I thought you'd go back to Universal after messing with Skyfire. I didn't expect you to come here. Are you interested in that 9th level adept?" Shui Mingjun asked, his face expressionless. Lin Qiao smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. He calmly said, "That's a level 9 energy core. Who wouldn't be interested in it? If it weren't for the fact that the first 9th level adept had a psychological problem, or that Lan Lu and the others didn't have much ambition, Xikong Chun wouldn't have been the leader of first base in China. Otherwise, the leader of the first base in China wouldn't be Xikong Chen, or rather, the first base wouldn't be China's base. If he went berserk, no one would be able to stop him. If he were to go berserk now, no one would be able to stop him. If they got their hands on the core, they'd have a better chance of breaking through to 9th level. So Lin Qiao's purpose in coming here wasn't just to get rid of Yan Huiguang, who knew her identity. She also couldn't let him have a chance to attack the 9th level adept. So the purpose of Lin Xiao's trip was not only to take revenge and get rid of Yan Huiguang, the person who knew his identity, but also to prevent him from having the chance to attack the rank 9 Arcanist. If Sikong-chan got his hands on the core, she didn't know what he'd do. If Sikong-chan were to obtain this rank 9 metahuman's energy core, who knows what this fellow would do. His ambition was obvious, and he didn't try to hide it. So the first thing was to deal with Li Jingye, and the second was to deal with Yan Huiguang. The third thing Lin Xiao wanted to do was to check on the rank 9 Arcanist. She wanted to observe the movements of the Chinese base. Perhaps she'd be able to glean some information. Shui Mingjun heard her reply and nodded. He looked left and right, then asked, "Did you wake Yan Huiguang up?" Lin Xiao stared at him for a while before replying, "Are you ready to see him?" If it wasn't for the fact that she felt that the relationship between the two of them was really just that of brothers and good friends, she would have thought that the two of them were a pair of lovers who tortured their hearts and bodies. However, Yan Huiguang's feelings for Shui Mingjun were a little special. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Shui Mingjun off so many times. Furthermore, she was clearly worried about his safety. Yet she refused to admit anything. Shui Mingjun's eyes darkened under his bangs. He sneered at Lin Xiao. "Isn't this what you want?" Lin Xiao clicked his tongue and looked at him with dissatisfaction. "TSK, your attitude makes me seem like a busybody. Looks like I should just kill him cleanly." If it wasn't for the fact that these two people were really useful to her, and Lin Xiao herself felt that it would be a pity to kill them, she might have really killed Yan Huiguang. "Or do you feel aggrieved because I forced you? Then go and settle the score with Yan Huiguang, because he knows something he shouldn't know. It's fine if he knows it himself. If he doesn't reveal it, I won't do anything to him. However, he has already revealed it, so I can't let him go so easily." Lin Xiao said faintly, then turned around and disappeared in front of him. After a while, he saw her appear with Yan Huiguang. Shui Mingjun's eyes widened. This woman was actually a space type. Previously, he heard that she was a poison mist type. Later, she became a poison fire type, and now she's a space type. How many types of abilities does she have? Could it be 3 types? He hadn't seen any 3 types of ability users appearing yet. When Yan Huiguang came out and saw Shui Mingjun, his expression turned gloomy. However, his face had always been gloomy, so no changes could be seen. On the other hand, when Shui Mingjun saw Yan Huiguang, he was shocked by Lin Xiao's space-type ability. At the same time, he seemed to be overreacting when he suddenly saw Yan Huiguang. "Yo, you actually didn't die. It seems that the zombie drug you've been researching for a year didn't have much effect." As soon as he saw Yan Huiguang, Shui Mingjun subconsciously condensed his ability in his palm. With a vigilant look, he also activated his taunt skill. "Humph. Are you disappointed that I didn't die?" After Yan Huiguang came out, he saw Shui Mingjun and sized him up from head to toe. Then he replied disdainfully to Shui Mingjun's taunt. Lin Xiao stood to the side and looked at the two people who started arguing as soon as they met. Shui Mingjun even subconsciously looked like he was ready to attack at any time. She immediately looked at the two people and said, "Very good. If you have any questions, quickly ask. After you're done, follow me to find Qingshan base." Yan Huiguang and Shui Mingjun both turned their heads to look at her at the same time. They coldly said to her, "We have no questions to ask." Although they said that, the meaning of the two people was telling Lin Xiao that they could directly follow her and she could take them wherever she wanted. Lin Xiao was speechless as she looked at the two awkward men. Even if the two of them found out about the secret of her space, she wasn't worried that they would reveal it. She could clearly see through Shui Mingjun's thoughts. If he had the thought of revealing it to others, she would immediately feel it. As for Yan Huiguang, it was a bit hard to say, because she could only feel Yan Huiguang's thoughts on the surface. She couldn't feel the depths of his heart. But it didn't matter. In any case, her most troublesome secret was already known by him. It didn't matter if he knew one more, so she just needed to control him in the base. In any case, he also had a weakness. Lin Xiao looked left and right at Yan Huiguang and right at Shui Mingjun. She suddenly said to the two people's appearances with curiosity, You two look very similar, but your personalities are clearly different. Regarding her boring topic, the two men chose to silently look at her at the same time. Okay, since you two don't want to ask, then I'll ask. Then, let me ask. Consider it as satisfying my curiosity. Lin Xiao suddenly smiled after saying that. Knowing what she wanted to mention, Yan Huiguang and Shui Mingjun were somewhat mentally prepared. However, their hearts couldn't help but sink, and the aura of their bodies also changed. The two of them subconsciously looked at each other at the same time, and then their gazes turned cold and then looked away at the same time. Lin Xiao looked at the sparks in the eyes of the two people, raised her eyebrows and said, "How about this? I don't want to know too much about your affairs. I just want to know, Shui Mingjun, what is the relationship between you and that woman called Xueqing?" Shui Mingjun was suddenly asked this name that hadn't appeared in his world for a long time. He was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He said blankly, "What relationship? We're just friends. And she's already... Why are you asking about her?" Lin Xiao glanced at Yan Huiguang's expression out of the corner of her eyes and then continued to say, "Before you separated, your relationship seemed to be very good. It didn't feel like you were ordinary friends." Of course, the person she was referring to was Yan Huiguang. Chapter 11:18. With regards to Lin Xiao's question, although Shui Mingjun didn't understand her intentions, he still unconsciously looked at Yan Huiguang and replied, "She used to be Yan Huiguang's woman. What relationship could she have with me?" Yan Huiguang looked coldly at Shui Mingjun and didn't say anything. However, his expression seemed to be saying, "You're lying," to Shui Mingjun. Originally, he thought that the female zombie would continue to ask, who knew that the next sentence she said was, "Is that so? Since there's no relationship, then forget it." Yan Huiguang, why didn't she follow the script? However, at this time, Lin Xiao looked at Shui Mingjun and said, "Why did you take away Yan Huiguang's weapons back then?" You should know how important those weapons were to Yan Huiguang at that time. She had already sensed this from Yan Huiguang's thoughts. Originally, Yan Huiguang had been estranged from Shui Mingjun because he was too close to that woman called Yuqing. At that time, Yan Huiguang had used the mutated plants he had researched to make a batch of drugs to trade with the Chinese base for a batch of powerful weapons. With this batch of weapons, Yan Huiguang's own research team would be able to quickly expand and gain a foothold in this post-apocalyptic world. Who would have thought that a few days before the trade, the weapons would suddenly go missing? Yan Huiguang and the Chinese finally found clues about the person who took the weapons, only to find out that it was his best brother, Shui Mingjun, who did it. When he opened fire, he was actually with the Huaxia people. At that time, the Huaxia people wanted to kill the Water Ming army. In order to prevent the Huaxia people from killing them, he opened fire in a moment of desperation. Thus, the two of them started to shed all pretense of cordiality. Shui Mingjun couldn't believe that he had been shot in the back, and felt extremely puzzled and angry. Thus, he used a year to recover his strength and began to seek revenge on Yan Huiguang. Shui Mingjun looked at her and asked, "You know quite a lot. No one told you about this, right? Who told you about it?" Those who knew about this had already been cleared out by him. Other than him and Yan Huiguang, no one else could have told her. He knew that this woman had a special perception, and could sense the thoughts of others. Thus, when he said, "Whose brain?" he was referring to the thoughts in her heart. Lin Xiao shrugged at him but glanced at Yan Huiguang. Then she said to him with a knowing expression, "So you haven't told me the answer yet." Before Lin Xiao glanced at Yan Huiguang, Shui Mingjun had already guessed the answer after he had said that. But he did not look at Yan Huiguang. Thinking back to the weapons incident, it didn't seem to have anything to do with the woman named Yuqing. Why would this woman ask him? Shui Mingjun thought for a moment and said, "That batch of weapons are all substandard, failed weapons." However, this secret was only known to the secret personnel in Huaxia at that time. Some people didn't know and happily thought that they were going to get the good stuff. After saying that, his expression suddenly darkened. He looked at Yan Huiguang and said, So you already knew that I did it? So he pretended not to notice? In the end, you shot me in the back? However, when Yan Huiguang said that the weapons were defective, his expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at him in disbelief. You said there's something wrong with those weapons? How did you know? And why didn't you tell me directly? Why did you have to secretly take those weapons away? He asked Shui Mingjun with some agitation. Shui Mingjun sneered at him. Would you listen if I told you? When did you ever listen to me? And you were often with people from Huaxia. They were watching you openly and secretly, and you didn't know that. If I went to you directly, wouldn't that be telling them that you already knew those weapons were broken? What do you think they would do? Yan Huiguang looked at him with a stiff expression, speechless for a moment. That's right, it was because of that woman. He had already distanced himself from Shui Mingjun. The two of them were getting farther and farther apart, and their contact was getting less and less. Even when Shui Mingjun said something, he didn't feel disgusted and shut the door, ignoring him. So in the end, it was because your relationship with that woman was inexplicably too intimate, and he took it to heart. In the end, the relationship between the two of you became more and more stiff, and you didn't even believe each other's words. Then you acted first and reported later. You wanted to solve the problem of the weapons first and then tell this long hair. But you didn't expect that before you could say anything, this man actually wanted to shoot you to death. Lin Xiao looked at Shui Mingjun and rubbed her chin, thinking about the matter between the two of them. When Shui Mingjun heard what she said, he immediately stared at Yan Huiguang, gritted his teeth and asked, Really? So it's like what she said? You actually suspect me because of that bitch? Will you die if you come and prove it to me face to face? Yan Huiguang asked him. What bitch? I didn't expect you to say that about her. I did think about asking you face to face, but I didn't find a chance. Then you secretly destroyed all my weapons. That woman seduced other men everywhere besides seducing you. At that time, I advised her to stay away from you, but I didn't expect you to think that we were together. Is there anything normal in your brain other than research? Shui Mingjun glared at him fiercely, raised his hand and pointed at him, scolding. So I was kind and good for you, but in the end, I was shot in the back by you. You said you told her to stay away from me? Then why didn't you directly say it to me? Besides, I dared to shoot to save you. If it wasn't me who shot, but someone from China, do you think you could still be alive and talking to me now? Yan Huiguang also didn't have a good expression, gloomily and coldly said to him. The ice shards in his voice could poke a group of zombies who came to join in the fun. Didn't I tell you? Think about it yourself. I told you to stay away from that woman at that time. But what did you say? You said I was jealous of you, that I was a single dog and couldn't bear to see you in a couple, right? What, did you forget? Shui Mingjun also sneered at him, but the anger in his tone was about to burn him up. Lin Xiao silently watched as the two of them quarreled. When the two of them were about to roll up their sleeves and start fighting, Lin Xiao stood up and watched. Then he suddenly said, So, now that the misunderstanding between you two has been solved, please put aside your personal grievances and troubles. Let's talk about cooperation. Yan Huiguang and Shui Mingjun both turned to look at her at the same time. What cooperation? Chapter 11:19. Don't talk about cooperation. Do you want to hear me tell you to choose between life and death? Lin Xiao looked at the two of them with a dark gaze. Yan Huiguang and Shui Mingjun shut their mouths. After a few seconds of silence, Shui Mingjun said, Your condition is for me and him to work for you in your base. What makes you think we'll agree? Lin Xiao cocked her head to the side. I didn't say I needed you to agree. I'm letting you choose. Come with me to Universal Base. It'll be better than your shameful life in Skyfire Base. As for you, you don't need to hide outside to find a place to do experiments. I can also do it for you in my base. Why don't you agree? She paused, then continued. Oh, it's fine if you don't agree. I've said it before. Killing you won't affect me much. Or do you have something against me that you don't want to follow me? She had both the strength and the territory she wanted. Whatever the other base leaders could do, she could do it too. Whatever the other base leaders couldn't do, she could do it too. What was there to be unhappy about? There wasn't a deep grudge between them. Did they really have to fight to the death? You're willing to let me experiment? You know what I'm doing, don't you? Yan Huiguang looked at her in surprise. I know, but I want you to change the direction of your research. Don't think about turning living people into zombies. Think about whether you can turn zombies into living people. Isn't that something new? Lin Xiao crossed his arms in front of his chest and said. Yan Huiguang was silent. Shui Mingjun looked at Lin Xiao, then at Yan Huiguang. Since I'm already here, I can't do anything about it. I'm already here, and I'm sure you understand what I mean. Yan Huiguang looked at him in silence. Lin Xiao heard Shui Mingjun's words and clapped her hands. Good. Since you're willing to join us, I'm sure you'll have a bright future in Base 1. If you've decided, then come with me. Lin Xiao waved her hand, and a few off-road military vehicles appeared. Then he waved at the surrounding zombies who had been watching for a while, and then he went into the first car. The other zombies immediately got into their respective cars. Shui Mingjun looked up at Yan Huiguang, then snorted lightly, found a car in the middle, and got in. Yan Huiguang expressionlessly watched Lin Xiao's car drive away and Shui Mingjun's car drive away. When the last car stopped in front of him, the driver inside looked at him. I say, do you want to come up? Or do you want to rely on your own 11 route to follow? Yan Huiguang's eyes flashed, and he immediately walked towards the car door. Lin Xiao led the caravan towards the Green Mountain base. Along the way, he would let them go first while he slipped away to collect some corpse cores or energy cores. She wouldn't let go of any zombies that reeked of blood from level 4 to level 6. However, he had yet to encounter a level 2 king, but he had encountered 2 level 7 mutant beasts. Looking at the big hairy cow in front of him that looked like a small hill, Lin Xiao wondered how many tons this guy weighed. Its long black hair hung down from its body, almost touching the ground. Its body was a full 20 to 30 meters long, and its height was more than 10 meters. A pair of huge horns grew out of its head. Rows of sharp teeth were exposed in its mouth, and the corners of its mouth were covered with dried blood. Since the apocalypse, carnivores still ate meat, but herbivores also began to eat meat. Those that originally grew in the ground without moving could now run, and even plants had evolved into carnivores. Looking at the level 7 mutant yak in front of him, Lin Xiao thought about the level 7 mutant horse that she had just killed 3 hours ago. That horse was actually very beautiful after it mutated. Apart from the pair of fleshy wings that looked particularly ugly, everything else was very good looking. Moreover, it was a level 7 mutant beast that had gone berserk. Looking at the horse, it was like a mad cow, crashing into everything it saw. Crashing into everything it saw, crashing into everything it saw. When Lin Xiao discovered it, it also happened to discover Lin Xiao's caravan. It immediately rushed over, baring its fangs and using its head to ram into their car. Moreover, its speed was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, it had appeared in front of them from a distance of 200 to 300 meters. In the end, Lin Xiao felt that its pair of fleshy wings were too unsightly, so she made a move to get rid of this crazy horse. Of course, a level 7 crazy horse was not easy to deal with. When it rushed over, apart from its speed, it also carried a violent wind attribute energy. It directly smashed one of Lin Xiao's cars into pieces. If it wasn't for the zombies in the car who reacted quickly and jumped out of the car, it was likely that they would have been smashed into pieces as well. Even Lin Xiao was unable to stop it. Hoo. The huge yak in front of them was still chewing, and a thick dark brown liquid flowed out, dripping down the long hair on its chin. Wow, from afar, I thought it was a small mountain. If it wasn't for the teeth moving and chewing, I wouldn't be able to tell that it was a cow. Yan Xiao stood beside Jing Yan, looking at the yak that stood up after being startled by Lin Xiao. Originally, the yak was lying down from afar, but when it was still a few hundred meters away, it sensed Lin Xiao's breath and immediately stood up. When it moved, the whole ground trembled slightly. The yak's face and eyes were all covered by the hair on its head. Other than the two huge horns on the top of its head and the exposed teeth, everything else was under its fur. Hoo. After the yak stood up, it did not make any movements. It just quietly chewed the food in its mouth, and the breath coming out of its nostrils caused the grass in front of it to sway slightly. Do you dare to go up and fight it? Jing Yan asked her. Yan Xiao shook her head and rolled her eyes. Are you kidding me? This is a level 7 mutated beast, not a level 5 one. Even if I go up, I wouldn't be able to stand up to its front hoof. That's true, such a big one. I'm guessing that he has thick skin and high defense. Jing Yan nodded and returned to the table expressionlessly. Lin Xiao said to Lin Dao, It's measuring our strength. I can feel its attention sweeping over everyone on our side. Its eyes are blocked. How can it see? Lin Kuei speechlessly looked at the hairy yak. Maybe it doesn't even see with its eyes. Lin Xiao glanced at him and said, then suddenly raised her hand and threw a black fireball at the yak. She threw a black fireball towards the yak. The bloody smell of the yak was mixed with the rotting smell and the violent aura, making it look like a huge moving demon. A strong dark evil thought came to them. Chapter 11:20. Although the black fireball that Lin Xiao threw was very small, the giant bull seemed to have sensed it very clearly. Tilted its head slightly towards the fireball. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a black aura at the fireball. Hoo! The black mist emitted a rotting smell, and it even carried a kind of sour smell. Z! The giant bull's black aura pounced on Lin Xiao's black flames, and immediately made a sizzling sound like hot iron touching cold water. Boom! However, in the next second, Lin Xiao waved his hand, and the small fireball suddenly expanded and instantly turned into a huge burning fireball. Then, the black aura was completely burned away. Seeing that its attack had been completely incinerated, it moved its two thick forelimbs slightly and stomped on the ground a few times in a slightly uneasy manner. Then, it let out a deafening roar in Lin Xiao's direction. Roar. Lin Xiao and the others only felt that the roar shook the ground, and even their ears were slightly numb. Roar, roar, roar. At this moment, the huge furry bull began to lower its head. Its chin shrunk inwards, and it raised two huge horns to the sky. It pressed the tips of the horns down towards Lin Xiao's direction. As it roared, it raised its horns and began to dig a hole on the ground with one of its front hooves. It was completely unafraid of Lin Xiao's black flames that were pouncing towards it. Because its hooves were very big, it quickly dug a hole that was more than a meter wide on the ground. Seeing that it was about to attack and was not afraid of the energy in his flames, Lin Xiao raised his eyebrows. He opened his palm and once again released a huge black flame that quickly fused with the previous flames. Then, under Lin Xiao's control, the huge black flame immediately changed shape. Soon, a giant bull with black flames appeared in front of everyone. The horns formed by the black flames faced the giant bull that was still digging a hole. When the giant bull saw the black bull that Lin Xiao had molded, its front limbs suddenly stopped moving. Then, it raised its head in confusion and looked at the black flame bull that looked similar to itself. Then, the giant bull suddenly stopped its attack mode and let out a strange roar. Ayo. After that, it immediately swung its long furry tail and moved its hind legs to the side. His entire body began to sway to the side, and strangely enough, his buttocks moved first, followed by his forelimbs and head. Lin Xiao's movements paused. He suddenly felt that it didn't look like it was going to attack. Ayo. Lin Xiao? Lin Kuei? The others were also confused. What was this cow trying to do? Just when they were feeling confused, they saw the huge bull slowly and strangely rubbing against Lin Xiao's flaming bull. Strange noises were coming out of his mouth. Why do I feel that this cow seems to be? At this moment, Yan Xiao, who was watching from the side, seemed to have thought of something, and her expression suddenly became a little strange. What's wrong? Jing Yan looked at her in confusion and asked. At this time, Everyone saw the giant bull sniff the buttocks behind Lin Xiao's flaming bull. Oh, I knew it. Why is it so strange? It turns out that this bull is in heat. Yan Xiao saw the bull's action and immediately came to a realization. Everyone. Lin Xiao was dumbfounded for a while, then revealed a speechless expression. She waved her hand and immediately changed the appearance of the black flaming bull. Then, it turned from a black flaming bull to a black flaming lion. The giant bull, who was happily circling behind the flaming bull, suddenly saw that the black flaming bull had disappeared and turned into a lion. It was stunned for a moment, then suddenly raised its head and let out a loud roar. Roar. There was obvious anger in its roar. Then, it turned around abruptly and rushed towards Lin Xiao with its head pressed down. The loud sound of its running shook the ground, and its body knocked down the trees along the way. Boom, boom, boom. The giant bull rushed over with a wild and violent aura, and a pair of red eyeballs could be faintly seen in its fur. Looks like it's very angry that the person it was interested in is gone. Yan Xiao, who was at the side, looked at the giant bull angrily rushing towards Lin Xiao, as if it was going to trample her into pieces. Lin Xiao controlled the equally large black flaming lion to pounce on the giant bull, and the two giant beasts collided. Boom! After the collision, Lin Xiao's black flaming lion immediately turned into a ball of flames that quickly wrapped around the giant bull's head, then spread towards its body. Roar, roar, roar. While Lin Xiao and the others were fighting the giant bull, Lin Hao, Lin Feng, and the others in the universal base were panicking. This was because Lin Wenwen, who was originally unconscious, suddenly disappeared. There really isn't anyone else's scent. The entire room only has Sister Wenwen's scent. No one else came in. Qiu Lily sniffed around the room where Lin Wenwen was originally lying, and said to the others at the door with a serious and puzzled expression, "How is that possible? Could it be that she disappeared by herself? Then did you smell any traces of her scent when she left here?" Lin Hao frowned, and asked Qiu Lily with a hint of anxiety in his eyes. He had clearly just left here 10 minutes ago. When he left, Lin Wenwen was still lying there, but in less than a few minutes, Xin Yuzhen rushed over and called him over to take a look, saying that something had happened there. When he heard that, he was stunned for a moment and reflexively ran over there. When he arrived, he only saw Qiu Lily walking around the room, and Lin Wenwen, who was lying on the bed, was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the blanket on her bed, it didn't seem to have been taken off, and it was neatly laid out on the bed. It was as if she had suddenly disappeared. Qiu Lily walked around the room again and again, carefully checking every corner, but in the end, she couldn't smell anything. Could it be that she used something to hide her scent and scent? Qiu Lily also frowned and asked with pursed lips. The moment when Lin Wenwen disappeared, they all thought that it was man-made. Because with Lin Wenwen's current condition, she definitely didn't run out by herself. Moreover, even if she woke up on her own, it was impossible for her to leave quietly. Therefore, it was reasonable for them to suspect that someone must have sneaked in and taken away the unconscious Lin Wenwen. However, the other party was so skilled that they didn't leave any clues in the room, not even a scent or scent. It was obvious that they were prepared. Chapter 11:21. Soon, Chen Xiaoai ran into Lin Feng's office. "Bad news, Deputy Leader. Miss Wenwen is missing," Chen Xiaoai said to Lin Feng anxiously as soon as he came in. Lin Feng, who was reviewing documents at his desk, paused and immediately raised his head to look at him. What? Obviously, he thought he didn't hear it clearly, or he looked at Chen Xiaoai in disbelief. How could a person disappear? Chen Xiaoai had to say it again. Dr. Lin just sent someone to inform us that Miss Wenwen suddenly disappeared from her ward 10 minutes ago, and now we don't know where she is. Lin Feng suddenly stood up from his chair. Disappeared? Still don't know where she is? Did she wake up? Chen Xiaoai looked at him and shook his head. We don't know the reason yet, but if she woke up on her own, she wouldn't leave without saying a word, right? Also, we didn't see her leave in the entire hospital. Then what's going on? Since she hasn't woken up, why did she disappear? Lin Feng frowned. Chen Xiaoai looked at him silently. He couldn't answer this question. He had to go to the hospital to understand the situation. Lin Feng closed the document in his hand and immediately picked up his coat. To the hospital. At this time, Yuan Tianxing had just received the news. It was Lin Yu who sent the message. Yuan Tianxing and Lin Feng also looked at Lin Yu in confusion. What did you say? What do you mean 1-1 disappeared? Isn't she lying unconscious in the hospital? Why did she disappear? Lin Yu stood in front of his desk and looked at him. This was sent by Lin Hao. He only said that 1-1 disappeared. He didn't say anything else, so the situation is unclear now. Yuan Tianxing frowned and thought about it. Does Lin Feng know about it? Lin Yu nodded. Little A has received the news. Yuan Tianxing immediately put down his work, stood up, grabbed his coat, and hurried out. Let's go take a look. He and Lin Feng arrived at the hospital one after another and went to Lin Wenwen's room. As soon as he saw them at the door, Yuan Tianxing asked, "What happened? I heard that 1-1 suddenly disappeared?" Everyone turned around to look at him, and then focused their gazes on Qiu Lily and Lin Hao. Lin Hao shook his head. "I just came to observe her before she disappeared. But a few minutes after I left, the nurse I sent to take care of 1-1 ran over and said that she was missing. When I sent for Lily, she looked around the room. However, he didn't sense anyone else's aura in the room. We are all very strange." Qiu Lily continued. "But if Sister 1-1 woke up by herself, why did she leave quietly? Also, I took a sniff, and her scent has always been in this room. There are no signs of it wandering out." After saying that, her little face scrunched up. She was obviously in a bad mood. As a zombie with a super-sensitive nose to smell, if one was taken away by someone, but the other party erased the smell and smell together. To her, this was a form of humiliation. Qiu Lily was very unhappy that such a thing had happened when Qiao Qiao was not around. If they couldn't find Lin 1-1 before Qiao Qiao came back, it would be terrible. Yuan Tianxing looked at the two of them, and then asked Lin Feng, "Then did someone come in and take 1-1 away? But you sent people to keep an eye on this place, right? Where are your people?" Lin Feng turned his head and looked at Chen Xiao AI outside the door. Chen Xiao AI said, "Report. They said they didn't find anything." What she meant was that they didn't see anyone suspicious come near here, so they didn't see anyone take Lin 1-1 away. Not to mention that Lin 1-1 left on her own, because they didn't see anything either. Everyone frowned. They didn't even see the hidden guards around them. Then did Lin 1-1 disappear into thin air? Just like how their leader did before. Could it be she's really like the leader before? She suddenly activated the invisibility skill? But even if she's invisible, did she wake up? Qiu Lily thought about it and suddenly said, "That's not right, like the leader. The premise is that she has a special skill like invisibility, so she would enter that state. But 1-1 doesn't have such a skill, so she wouldn't go into invisibility. And look at this bed, the blanket didn't seem to be lifted, or it was lifted and then put back. But even if she got up by herself, why can she tidy up the blanket? But the person didn't appear? This doesn't make sense." Lin Hao thought about it and pointed at the blanket on the bed. His words made everyone silent for a while. It made sense. Right, isn't 1-1 a space element? Could it be that she ran into her own space? Yuan Tianxing suddenly thought of Lin Xiao's ability. He was stunned and said, Everyone's eyes lit up. It was obviously very possible. Yeah, why didn't I think of that? But 1-1's space doesn't seem to be able to store living things. Lin Hao slapped his forehead and said, but then his expression became uncertain. Didn't you say there's a prerequisite? So 1-1's prerequisite is space element. So she put herself into her space? Yuan Tianxing looked at him and asked. Or should I say, the quality of her space has increased. In the past, it couldn't store living things, but now it has increased to the level of leader, and living people can also live in space, Lin Hao guessed. No matter what, send people to search the entire base first, especially to seal off all the exits. Even if it's very likely that she entered her space, we can't rule out the possibility that she was brought into another space by someone else. It's also possible that the other party erased the traces here before leaving. After saying that, Enchanting turned and ordered Li Zhang, who was standing outside the door. Li Zhang, immediately send people to seal off the base's exits, and pay attention to suspicious people. Lin Yu informed Feng Mingyu, Lei Yao, and Fei Chonglin to quickly bring people to search the entire base. Yes. Yes. Lin Yu and Li Zhang responded at the same time, then quickly left to do their mission. Lin Feng looked at Qiu Lily and asked her, Lily, why don't you go back to the second base to take a look? We have to be prepared to make 2 guesses to be safe. Qiu Lily nodded. Okay, I understand. After saying that, she flashed and disappeared with a light breeze. The Lin brothers and Enchanting were left in the room thinking, and then they all stared at Lin Wenwen's bed in a daze. At this time, Lin Wenwen had indeed woken up, but she was lost. Looking at the unfamiliar scene in front of her, she stood on the road with people coming and going, dumbfounded at everything in front of her. Chapter 11:22. Bustling streets, bustling crowds, normal plants, intact high-rise buildings, fresh air, and clear skies. Everything in front of her was a picture that Lin Wenwen, who had lived in the apocalypse for 7 years, felt unfamiliar yet familiar. The traffic on the road did not have the desolation and dilapidation that she was familiar with. Lin Wenwen stood at the side of the road in a daze, unable to react for a moment. Just when she was a little out of sorts, her shoulder was bumped by someone who passed by. Oh, sorry. That person immediately turned around and apologized to her with a smile. Lin Wenwen then came back to her senses and smiled at him, saying, It's okay. After seeing that person leave, Lin Wenwen's mind became clear. Where was this? What was this situation? How did she get here? She subconsciously lowered her head to look at her clothes, and she froze for a moment when she saw them, because she was not wearing clothes that she was familiar with. And what was with this pair of thick and short legs? After taking a closer look, Lin Wenwen's legs widened. Fuck, it was not an illusion. It really was a lot thicker. Not only were her legs thicker, even her body was thicker, and her legs had become shorter. Oh my God! Lin Wenwen looked at her legs and body that were thicker than before in shock, her face full of disbelief. She abruptly raised her hands and turned them over and over. Only then did she realize that these hands were also different from her own. Looking at the slightly chubby hands, Lin Wenwen's face was full of disbelief and confusion. She raised her hands to touch her face, and as expected, her face was fleshy. And wasn't the fringe in front of her forehead a little too long? No, her fringe was slanted. Why did it look flat now? She raised her hands to touch her head, and in the end, she felt a head of long hair. Although it was not very long, it was much longer than before. No, it wasn't like this. Everything was not right. The strong feeling of incongruity made Lin Wenwen a little confused. She looked left and right, and suddenly saw a street that looked like a commercial street on the other side. Many of the storefronts there were built with glass. She immediately ran over, but after running for a few dozen meters, she felt as if she was panting like a cow and could not lift her legs. By the time she reached the other side, she was so tired that she had to support herself against the wall. This wasn't her body. Lin Wenwen had trained for a long time in Lin Xiao's new base. He could run for 2 hours without any problems. But now, she had only been running for less than 2 minutes, and she already felt like her soul was flying away. Leaning against the side of a shoe store, he stood in front of the glass display window. Looking at the person reflected in the mirror, Lin Wenwen was in complete despair. She covered her face and squatted down. No, what was reflected in the glass was not her face, not her figure, not even her height. The girl inside looked very young, about 16 or 17 years old. She had shoulder-length hair and bangs that almost covered her eyes. Her face was round, and her facial features were squinted by her flesh. No matter how you looked at it, it was not her original face. His height should be about 1.5 meters, and he was wearing a tight suit, with a body of 1.5 meters and at least 130 pounds. He actually dared to wear tight clothes. So, when he saw the layers of swim rings on his stomach caused by the clothes, Lin 11 directly covered his face and squatted down. Are you okay? At this moment, a confused voice suddenly came from the side. Lin 11 looked up and saw a young girl wearing a store uniform looking at her worriedly. She quickly stood up and waved at the girl with an embarrassed smile. "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." "Thank you." Looking at the logo of the shop's name on the girl's uniform, Lin 11 knew that her actions here must have attracted the girl's attention. She thought that she might be feeling unwell. Although his heart was about to collapse, Lin 11 still looked calm on the surface and thanked the service staff of the store. The girl looked at her strangely. After confirming that she really seemed to be fine, she nodded and returned to the store. Lin 11 immediately retreated to the side. She searched her body left and right, and then took out a phone. She pressed a button, and the screen immediately showed the time and date. However, the screen of the phone was locked, and opening it required a password. Fortunately, this phone was considered an advanced model, and it already had a fingerprint unlock function. Lin 11 used her fingerprint to unlock the phone, and the interface of the phone immediately opened. Looking at the 4G network displayed in the upper left corner, Lin 11 couldn't help but have a feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Internet, something that had already disappeared in the end of the world. Looking at the date, she was now in the time 3 months before the end of the world. She actually returned to 7 years ago. Moreover, she ran into someone else's body. She could finally understand her sister's feelings at that time. Fortunately, she didn't turn into a tattered zombie. How did she become like this? Why did she return to 7 years ago? Moreover, why did she change her appearance? This seemed to be someone else's body, right? Lin 11 remembered that she was in the abnormal state of advancing her second ability. Later, she used up all the space energy with great difficulty, and then began to absorb energy from the zombie cores. Then she found that the energy she absorbed was fused with another energy. Just like Lin Hao said, after her space ability was not maintained by energy, the energy of the second ability began to occupy her body. Then she found that she was getting more and more sleepy, and when she woke up, she found herself in a strange space with nothing around her. She couldn't move and could only stand there quietly. It seemed like she stood there for a long time, but also not for long. In any case, she didn't feel tired. Moreover, she felt like she was floating. She didn't know how much time had passed. When she woke up in a daze. That's how it became like this. Was this considered rebirth? Or time travel? If she returned to her own body from 7 years ago, it would be fine. But now she ran into someone else's body. What was this? Could she return to that time in the end of the world? Could it be that she would live in this body in the future? No, if you can help me do a few things, I will let you return to your original place. Just when Lin 11 was confused, suddenly a voice sounded in her mind. Who are you? Lin 11 was shocked, and a sharp light flashed in her narrowed eyes, but the voice didn't appear again. Lin 11 frowned and turned around, using her extraordinary observation skills trained in the end of the world to carefully observe the surrounding situation. She didn't find any suspicious figures. Then who was it that spoke just now? Moreover, the voice was directly transmitted into her mind, but her ears couldn't hear anything. Chapter 11:23. Just as Lin 11 was observing her surroundings, the phone in her hand suddenly vibrated. Lin 11 looked down and saw the word brother on the screen. Was it this body's brother? Should she answer it? What if she was confused and couldn't answer his question? Would it make him feel that something was wrong? Just as she was hesitating, the phone kept ringing. Just as Lin 11 gave up on picking up the call, It rang again after the first call ended. Lin 11 stared at the phone in silence. After some thought, she still picked up the call. If the other party didn't pick up the call, he would probably be very anxious. Hello. A clear male voice came from the other side. The other party asked in confusion, Xin, why did you only pick up the phone now? Xin? Xin? Or Xin? So this was the name of the owner of this body? Lin 11 rolled her eyes and found an excuse. Oh, yeah, I was thinking about something and didn't notice. The other party immediately asked, Oh, then where are you now? If I don't look at you, you'll disappear. Don't run around. Don't you remember that you have no sense of direction? I won't be able to find you later. The tone of this body's brother seemed to be very concerned about the owner of this body, as if he was a parent who was worried about her as a child. I'm at a shoe shop opposite Paradise Coffee. Lin 11 glanced at his surroundings. There was a rather large coffee shop opposite him. She answered the other party's question. Stay there and don't move. How did you get there? You have no sense of direction. We're going there now. The other party immediately ordered her to stay there. He hung up immediately after speaking. It seemed that the other party wasn't alone. Lin 11 looked at the phone screen and thought. Looking at the strange face on the screen, she raised her hand and combed her bangs. Upon closer inspection, the face of this body wasn't that bad. Her facial features were quite good, but there was too much flesh on her face which squeezed her facial features. Her eyes were quite wide even when she tried to open them. When Dong Lijia found his chubby sister, he saw her raising her phone and winking at her face. He didn't know what she was doing. I see it. It's over there. He said to the others around him and walked towards Lin 11. Then he called out to her. Xin, this way. When Lin 11 heard the voice on the phone, he immediately looked up. Seeing a few handsome men and beautiful women walking over, he instantly felt as if he was blinded by their beauty. Damn it, it felt like the owner of this body was standing with these people. It was as if something strange had sneaked in. He watched speechlessly as the 2 men and 2 women walked over. One of them was about 1.8 meters tall, handsome and thin. He was about 20 years old and waved at him. What are you daydreaming about? Let's go. What are you still standing there for? One of the 2 girls with a long ponytail smiled and shouted at Lin 11. Lin 11 slowly walked over while silently observing the expressions and gazes of these people. Other than the one who had just called him Big Brother, the other boy had no expression on his face. However, his appearance was more than twice as handsome as the owner of this body's older brother. He was also 1.9 meters tall and his body was strong and straight. One look and you could tell that he was a handsome guy at the school level. Looking at the 2 girls next to him, one of them had a ponytail and the other had straight hair that reached her waist. Both of them had light makeup on their faces. Their facial features were exquisite and their figures were not bad. They were also more than 1.65 meters tall and wore a pair of 10-centimeter high heels. Beautiful girls. A handsome guy with a beautiful girl was really eye-catching. Look at the reaction of the passers-by. She knew how beautiful this combination was. However, after looking at the 2 girls' eyes, Lin 11 sneered in her heart. Don't think that just because she was far away, she couldn't see the disdain in the 2 girls' eyes when they saw her like this. At least try to hide it. Why did you come here? Didn't I tell you to wait at the square? Here, your drink. The shorter brother walked to Lin 11 with a hot drink in his hand. He complained, but his actions were very honest, showing the attributes of a siscon. Yeah, it's so hot here. The sun is so bright. Aren't you hot? Xin? The girl with straight hair covered her eyes with her white hands. She asked Lin 11. Lin 11 looked at the girl without saying anything. She still didn't know what the original owner's personality was like. Would she smile? Would she be cheerful or gloomy? If she didn't act like herself, she could probably ignore the other 3. But her brother would definitely notice it. So Lin 11 decided to deal with it by not changing. Without waiting for Lin 11 to answer, her brother answered for her first. It must be hot. Xin is afraid of the heat. After saying that, He looked at Lin Wonwon strangely again. Yeah. Aren't you afraid of the heat? Why did you come here? It was the beginning of July now, and it was indeed hot from noon to afternoon. Well, how could she explain this? It must be strange that the original owner was afraid of the heat and came so far away. Lin Wonwon looked at him calmly, but in her heart, she was thinking about what reason to make it more natural. She looked around. This was a commercial street, and in front of them was a commercial square. Since it was a commercial street, they must be here to shop. Oh, Before she could finish her sentence, her cheapskate brother answered first. Are you here to buy shoes? I remember you said you wanted to buy a pair of high heels last time. That's why I said you can't wear high heels when you are still growing. Why don't you listen to me? Lin Wonwon silently turned her head and looked at the shoe store next to her. It was indeed a shoe store. But this brother naturally helped her solve the problem, so of course, she would follow his steps. Because I am short, she murmured, then slightly lowered her head. She looked a little wronged. Okay, Lija. Xin also likes to be beautiful. Is it wrong for girls to like to be beautiful? At this time, the girl with the ponytail said to Dong Lija with a smile. Lin Wonwon looked at her gratefully, then smiled at her, then turned her head to look at Dong Lija. But she slightly observed the girl with the ponytail from the corner of her eye. Sure enough, she saw the girl with the straight hair at an angle that the two boys couldn't see and secretly exchanged glances with the girl with the straight hair. Okay, don't always instill some strange ideas into my sister's head. She is just 17 years old now. Wearing high heels will affect her bone development. Hearing the girl speak up for his sister, Dong Lija immediately glanced at the girl with the ponytail with dissatisfaction. After that, he immediately took his sister's hand, then turned around and walked toward the square. Chapter 11:24. Just when Lin Wonwon had somehow returned to another time and space, Lin Feng and the others in the base had turned the entire base over and over again, but they didn't find anyone suspicious. Wu Changyue and Haiqing also received the news soon. You said that Wonwon disappeared into thin air? Could it be that she is like their leader, and her ability is out of order? Wu Changyue sat on the sofa in the office with Tungting in his arms and looked up at Xiao Liqing in confusion. Tungting also looked up at Xiao Liqing, thought for a moment and said, Auntie is a space-type ability user, but her second ability is very special. Even I don't know what kind of ability it is. I only know that she can predict what is going to happen. If her ability is out of order, could it be the result of the two abilities working together? Xiao Liqing looked at the father and son and said, I heard that Wonwon has been abnormal these days because of the advancement of her ability. Wu Changyue and Tengting looked at each other. If it wasn't for Lin Xiao, they definitely wouldn't think so. But from the moment Lin Xiao was reborn in another person's body, it showed that she was special. And her sister actually awakened this special ability. Could it be that it was passed down in the family? Do Lin Feng and the others have any clues? Wu Changyue thought for a moment and asked. Xiao Liqing shook his head and said, They don't know what is going on. They are searching for the situation in the base, but there is no progress so far. That woman ran to Qingshan base again after finishing her business. I don't think she will come back so soon. Get ready, let's go to the base to understand the situation. Wu Changyue thought about Lin Xiao's movements and estimated that she would not come back so soon. In any case, she was his current sister-in-law. He couldn't let anything happen to her and not care about it. Yes. Tengting sighed and said, we have only been back here for 2 days, and we have to go back again. After saying that, his little face scrunched up, but his young and tender facial features made his slightly mature expression look adorable. He couldn't create that kind of atmosphere at all. Papa, when can you bring Mama over to settle down? Oh, I guess in Mama's heart you can't compare to her base, so why don't you go and marry her? It saves me the trouble of running around every day. Little Tung Tang suddenly looked at Wu Changyue and said. Then, he looked at Wu Yueling and asked, Lingling, what do you think? Let's go live in the universal base from now on. Wu Yueling was sitting on the other side, concentrating on drawing on the drawing board when she heard Tungting calling her. She raised her head and looked at him. After thinking for a while, she nodded. Anyway, she was used to running around on both sides, so it didn't matter which side she was on. As long as she could be with her papa and Xiao Teng, it would be fine. Wu Chengyue looked at Xiao Teng speechlessly and said, "It doesn't matter if I visit, but the premise is that your mother is willing." The kid was right. In the female zombie's heart, Lin Sun's heart was filled with hatred. His importance was probably behind Xiao Teng, the base, and his family before it was his turn. Tung Tung said confidently, "Don't worry, she's definitely willing now. Besides, Papa, didn't you successfully invade her territory last time? This means that she has actually accepted you. Don't you understand yet?" Wu Chengyue looked at him with a smile and said, "Well, now I understand." At this moment, Li Yueshan ran in again. Holding a secret report, he said to him, "Leader, there's new news from Huaxia." Wu Chengyue looked at him with a flash in his eyes, raised his hand and said, "Give it to me." When he raised his hand, Li Yueshan took the initiative to hand over the envelope with the secret report. Wu Chengyue opened the envelope and flipped through the contents, then began to read it carefully. The more he read, the more Wu Chengyue pursed his lips and frowned slightly. The news said that Sikong Chan had already contacted some foreign base forces and was carrying out some transactions. It was possible that his transactions with foreign countries were about the experimental weapons he was currently making. If he used domestic goods and resources to trade some weapon technologies that were not available in China from abroad, then his biological and chemical weapons would definitely be greatly improved. It was very beneficial for Sikong Chan, but for Wu Chengyue and the other leaders of other bases, it was not so optimistic. It seemed that they had to use some special methods to find out what kind of transactions Sikong Chan had made. At present, they still didn't know what they had traded, so they didn't know what the consequences of their successful transactions would be. Therefore, they could only first figure out their details before making a plan. Go inform Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui to prepare for the meeting. By the way, tell Xiao Liqing that the departure time of the Universal Life Base will be delayed by 3 hours. Yes. Li Yueshan immediately received the order and went out. At this time, Lin Xiao had already swallowed the crazy huge hairy cow with her black fire, obtained the energy core of a level 7 mutated beast, and continued to head towards Qingshan Base. Yan Huiguang and Shui Mingjun, who followed her all the way, treated each other as transparent, not even looking at each other, let alone speaking. It was simply too awkward. Looking at these two men, Duan Wan, Yan Xiao and Jing Yan from time to time gathered together and guessed, "I bet that before we arrived at the destination, these two definitely haven't spoken yet." Yan Xiao was holding a stainless steel basin in her hand, in which were pieces of raw meat soaked in water. She scooped up a piece of meat and put it in her mouth, munching on it and said, "No, I guess before we arrived there." The meat in the basin in her hand was soaked in the lake water in Lin Xiao's space. After soaking for 2 or 3 hours, it would have a sweet taste in the mouth of zombies, and was also tender and delicious. Therefore, Lin Xiao would occasionally catch a few mutated beasts along the way, and cut off pieces of meat to soak for everyone to eat. Unfortunately, she forgot to leave the meat of the cow, and at that time she accidentally swallowed the cow. I guess even after arriving at the destination, they won't pay attention to each other. Jing Yan stood beside her expressionlessly. While speaking, she calmly pinched out a piece of meat from the basin in Yan Zhao's hand and put it in her mouth. The two female zombies ate the raw meat like snacks. Duan Wan, who couldn't eat raw meat, could only watch from the side. If she wanted to eat, she had to start a fire and roast it before eating. I think the one who spoke first should be Shui Mingjun, because Yan Huiguang isn't the kind of person who likes to speak first. Yan Xiao smacked another piece of meat into her mouth. At this time, a gust of wind flashed, and a big dog suddenly appeared in front of the three of them. It sat on its hind buttocks, sticking out its tongue, and used a pair of black and shiny dog eyes to stare at the basin in Yan Zhao's hand. "You finished gnawing on the bones?" This meat isn't even enough to fill the gaps between your teeth. Don't fight with us. Yan Xiao saw Wang, and her expression immediately collapsed. Chapter 11:25. Wang was unmoved. He stuck out his tongue and continued to look at the meat in her hand. If you don't give it a bite, it won't leave, Duan Wan said with a smile. Yan Xiao had no choice but to throw a piece of meat to Wang with a bitter face. It's not even enough for a few bites? Jing Yan looked at her with a poker face. Who told it to see you? Lin Qiao sat on the other side and looked in the northwest direction. After a while, a car drove over. Xie Dong got out of the car and walked in front of her. The situation has been investigated, and Lan Lu has received news that you are heading to their base. They should be sending someone to find you soon. Lin Xiao looked at him and asked, how is the level 9 metahuman doing? Xie Dong looked at Yan Huiguang in the distance and said to Lin Xiao, his destructive power has decreased a lot, and his body has been injured in many places. Although his physical fitness is very strong, if he runs out of energy, his body will become weak very soon. Lin Xiao nodded and said, so he is about to use up the energy in his energy core? Almost. The people at Qingshan base are getting nervous, and there are movements in Huaxia. I think they will attack the target in the near future. Xie Dong nodded. What is Lan Lu doing? If she guessed correctly, Lan Lu should be standing guard around their leader to protect him. They were there to prevent outsiders from attacking the weakened level 9 metahuman. Lan Lu is guarding the level 9 metahuman. It looks like he is trying to prevent outsiders from harming their leader, Xie Dong said. Then we have to hurry. Lin Xiao's eyes darkened, and she immediately stood up. Get ready to go. Yes. Xie Dong nodded and turned to the zombies. Get ready to go. Yan Xiao was about to throw the last piece of raw meat to Wang. When she heard this, she immediately threw it into her mouth. Then she poured the water out of the basin and ran to the car with it. Wang, who was waiting for the last bite of meat with his mouth wide open. Damn it. I was waiting for you with my mouth wide open, and you ate it yourself? Don't run. Give me back my meat. Seeing Yan Xiao eat the last piece of meat and run into the car, Wang immediately turned around and kicked his legs. He swung his tail and jumped. In the next second, he landed on the roof of Yan Zhao's car. Don't damage my car. Lin Qiao saw it jump out of the corner of her eye and immediately shouted at it. In the end, bang. Okay, if it rained, the roof of that car would leak. Wu, silently retracting his sharp claws, Wang obediently sat on the roof of the car under Lin Qiao's glare. At the same time, he used his paws to secretly cover the holes on the roof of the car. You can't blame it. It's all because the roof of this broken car is too brittle. It's like a piece of paper that's easily pierced through. You quarreling dog. If you don't be careful, I'll cut off your claws one day. Lin Qiao glared at it angrily and helplessly before turning around and getting into her car. Awu, awu, awu. Wang raised his mouth and barked twice. Unconvinced. It's not my fault. Why did you cut off my claws? It's the fault of the person who stole my snacks. Why didn't you cut off her claws? Shui Mingjun sat in the car and asked Yi Qingxian, do you all remember your previous memories? Yi Qingxian looked at him and took off his sunglasses. Nodding, he said, I remember. Shui Mingjun looked at him in amazement. You all remember everything? Why? He had become a zombie, but he still had memories. It was amazing. Weren't zombies' brains all dead? It was fine that he could think, but it was strange that he could still remember the past. He could also speak, which was even more strange. His skin had also returned to normal. Apart from the lack of color, he didn't look wrinkled or rotten like other zombies. Then do you all have an uncontrollable urge to eat people? When Shui Mingjun saw these people take off their sunglasses, he was shocked by the evil black eyes of the zombies. Yi Qingxian heard him say this and turned to look at him. Then he suddenly stuck his face over and sniffed at him at close range. Ah! Shui Mingjun was obviously scared by him and instinctively shrank back, staring at him with his eyes wide open. Yi Qingxian shrank back and put some distance between them. Then he smiled and said, "What are you afraid of? If you wanted to eat, you would have already eaten. Before I recovered my memory, I couldn't control myself. After I recovered my memory, I had a psychological resistance. It's like having an extra wall. As long as we don't lose our minds, we can basically control ourselves." Shui Mingjun looked at him in surprise, but then he thought it made sense. Although they had become zombies after they recovered their memory, their humanity also recovered. Eating people was still a taboo. At least they couldn't get over the psychological barrier. "You said that after you recovered? Did you recover because you met the current leader?" But Shui Mingjun quickly caught the key point in his words. Yi Qingxian looked at him and smiled. "That's right. You should have noticed that our batch of zombies is different from the zombies that your old lover experimented on. We have more freedom." Shui Mingjun looked at him coldly when he heard the words old lover. What the hell was that? Was that a word used to describe two men? But Yi Qingxian didn't seem to mind. He smiled and continued, "You've seen our leader's strength. She's in a good mood. Otherwise Star Firebase would have suffered the same fate as Earth Dragon. We didn't even take the supplies from Starfire's warehouse. How kind." Speaking of this, Shui Mingjun asked curiously, "Isn't your leader from Ocean City? Why does she hate Earth Dragon, Hidden Cloud City, and the other bases so much? She's not even from Hades. There's no need to go all out for revenge." Yi Qingxian's eyes flashed, but he shook his head. "Wrong. Who said we were the ones to get back at them? They were the ones who provoked our leader first. Your information isn't accurate, or perhaps you're thinking from the wrong angle." Hearing his words, the Shui Mingjun suddenly recalled that before the Earth Dragon base was retaliated against, Long Yubai had indeed run to East China first. He had even attacked the base that had yet to be built at that time, but he had been beaten back. It wasn't long before Long Yubai, the deputy leader of Earth Dragon, and some of the senior officers were all assassinated. Then he thought back to Hidden Cloud City. It seemed they were the ones who had targeted Universal Life Base first. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.